The boom tube tore reality like fabric ripped by divine hands. In the heart of Metropolis, between gleaming skyscrapers that reflected Superman's city of tomorrow, a wound opened in the sky, not the controlled portal of new god technology, but something raw and screaming. The dimensional breach vomited fire and ash, and through it fell a man who had killed gods. Kratos hit the pavement hard enough to crater the street. His blades, those cursed chains forged in the depths of Hades, still warm with the blood of Olympus, dragged behind him, scraping sparks against concrete that had never known such fury. The ghost of Sparta rose slowly, white ash coating skin scarred by a lifetime of divine warfare, and surveyed a world he did not recognize. Buildings of glass and steel instead of marble temples. Mortals screaming and fleeing rather than cowering in worship. And above it all, a symbol he had never seen, a red and blue figure descending from the sky like Apollo riding his chariot. Except this god wore no crown, and his eyes held something Kratos had forgotten existed, genuine concern for the mortals below. Superman landed 30 feet away, cape settling around shoulders that could move planets, and for the first time in his journey through realms, Kratos faced a being whose power resonated like divine heritage, but whose stance spoke of protection rather than dominion. The Man of Steel's eyes narrowed, scanning the scarred warrior with vision that pierced flesh and bone, cataloging the impossible. A mortal body containing divine strength, weapons radiating infernal energy, or in a soul so stained with blood that even X-ray vision seemed to recoil. "You're hurt," Superman said, and the words struck Kratos harder than any blow from Zeus had. Not a threat, not a command, concern. For him, a stranger who had shattered his city street. Kratos' hand tightened on the blades of chaos, chains rattling with remembered screams. "I need no god's mercy." "I'm not a god," Superman replied. But even as he spoke, Kratos saw the lie in it, or perhaps the truth the being before him hadn't yet accepted. Power radiated from him like heat from Helios's chariot. The mortals who fled called his name with reverence Zeus would have envied. This was a god who pretended to be a man, and that made him either the most dangerous kind or the most tragic. The sky split again. Not a boom tube this time, but something darker, a shadow that moved against the sun and brought with it the smell of burning worlds. Three figures descended on pillars of fire, armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, wings that beat with mechanical precision, and eyes that glowed with the red fury of conquest. Parademons, Darkseid's shock troops. Kratos didn't know their name yet, but he recognized their purpose. He had fought enough of Ares' monsters to know soldiers when he saw them. Superman moved between the parademons and the fleeing civilians with speed that defied mortal comprehension. Heat vision lanced through the air, precise and controlled, cutting down the lead creature mid-flight. But these were not the mindless beasts of Olympus. Even as the first fell, the others adapted, splitting their approach, forcing Superman to choose between targets. Kratos made the choice for him. The blades of chaos screamed from their sheaths, chains extending with muscle memory earned through centuries of slaughter. He launched himself at the leftmost parademon with Spartan precision, blades hooking into its armor and dragging it earthward. The creature's shriek cut short as Kratos' boot connected with its skull, driving it into the same crater his arrival had created. The blade followed, punching through alien metal and flesh that burned with technology he didn't understand but could still kill. The third parademon tried to flee. Superman's freeze breath caught it mid-flight, encasing it in ice that fell like a meteor. The Man of Steel caught it before impact, setting it down gently even though the creature within would have killed him given the chance. In the silence that followed, amid the settling dust and the distant wail of sirens, Superman and Kratos stood 10 feet apart. The god who claimed humanity studied the god-killer who had lost his. Above them, the boom tube scar was already healing, but its presence had been noted. In the watchtower, Batman's screens lit with alerts. On Themyscira, Wonder Woman felt a disturbance in the Greek pantheon's echo. And on Apocalypse, Darkseid smiled, because something impossible had entered his universe, and the Lord of Tyranny always found use for impossible things. "I'm Clark," Superman said, extending a hand. "Welcome to Earth. You're going to want to come with me? There are people who'll want to talk to you about those parademons, about where you came from, About those blades. Kratos looked at the offered hand, remembering another hand extended in friendship once, one before betrayal, before Ares had twisted his mind and guided his blades through his own family's flesh, before he had become the ghost of Sparta, the god of war, the murderer of Olympus. But this Clark, this god pretending to be a farm boy, his hand didn't waver, didn't command, simply offered. For the first time in lifetimes, Kratos reached back. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The Watchtower's teleportation beam took them both skyward, leaving Metropolis to recover from its first taste of what happened when one universe's violence bled into another's hope. On Apocalypse, Desaad began compiling reports. On New Genesis, why Highfather consulted the source, and in Gotham's Shadows, Batman pulled files on every mythological god-killer in history, already building contingencies for the man who had just clasped hands with the strongest being on Earth. Kratos had entered a universe where gods walked as heroes, where hope persisted despite darkness, where the cycle of divine violence might possibly finally end, or where it would begin anew with a fury Olympus had never imagined. The Watchtower materialized around them in a shimmer of light that reminded Kratos too much of Hermes' divine speed. Technology masquerading as godhood, or perhaps godhood disguised as technology. The space station hung in Earth's orbit, a crystalline fortress that made Olympus's marble halls look primitive by comparison. Through massive viewport windows, Kratos could see the planet below, a sphere of blue and green that held more life than all of Sparta had ever dreamed existed. Waiting for them in the observation deck stood three figures who radiated power, like the fates themselves had woven destiny into their forms. Wonder Woman wore her armor like a second skin, the golden eagle across her chest catching starlight through the viewports. Her eyes, ancient and knowing, locked onto Kratos with recognition that made his hands drift toward his blades. She knew. Somehow, this warrior goddess knew what he was. Batman stood in shadows even this illuminated station couldn't fully banish, cape merging with darkness that seemed to follow him like a loyal hound. No visible weapons, but Kratos had fought enough enemies to recognize a predator's stillness. Now, this one had already assessed 17 ways to kill him and was calculating an 18th. Superman took position between them, the mediator, though Kratos noted he positioned himself where he could intercept either Diana or Bruce if violence erupted. Smart. Zeus had never been that tactically aware. "Diana, Bruce, this is our guest," Superman began, but Wonder Woman cut him off with a voice that carried Amazonian steel. "Ghost of Sparta." Not a question, an accusation wrapped in Greek syllables that belonged to his old world. "Kratos, son of Zeus, murderer of Olympus, the blades of chaos themselves cry out your crimes." Kratos' scars burned white hot. No one in this realm should have known those names. "Your gods are not mine, Amazon." "My gods are yours," Diana stepped forward, hand not quite touching the sword at her hip. "One Zeus who fathered you fathered me. Ares, whose mantle you stole, was my brother. The pantheon you slaughtered for vengeance. They echo here, diminished, but they remember the ghost who ended their reign. They remember a god who turned his son into a weapon and acted surprised when it cut him down." Kratos growled, "If your Zeus is anything like mine, he deserves the same blade." "Stand down, Diana." Batman's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Quiet, controlled, absolutely certain it would be obeyed. "We don't judge people for killing gods in self-defense. Not after what some of ours have tried." The dark night moved into the light, and Kratos saw the calculations continuing behind those white lenses. "I know what you are, what you've done. I pulled files from Themyscira's archives the moment Diana felt your arrival. A disturbance in the Greek pantheon's resonant signature. You murdered your way through an entire divine hierarchy. Zeus, Ares, Athena, Poseidon, Hades, even Kronos himself. They earned their deaths. Maybe." Batman's cowl tilted, considering. "The question is, are you still that killer, or are you something else now?" Superman's hand rested on Diana's shoulder, calming, and Kratos watched the warrior goddess accept the touch despite the fire in her eyes. These three operated as a unit, The hope, the warrior, and the shadow. Trinity. He'd faced divine trinities before, but never one bound by choice rather than blood or cosmic mandate. The parademons that attacked Metropolis, Superman said, steering toward solid ground. They're soldiers from Apocalypse, another world, a hell planet ruled by Darkseid, a being who makes your father look like a minor deity. He's been trying to conquer Earth for years. Why? Kratos demanded. What does a god need with one world? The anti-life equation, Batman answered. A mathematical proof that free will is meaningless. If Darkseid obtains it, he can rewrite every mind in the universe to worship him, complete dominion over all existence. Kratos felt ice settle in his chest. I have fought tyrant gods. They always hunger for more worship, more control. This Darkseid, he is the same evil wearing different armor. Yes, Diana said quietly, and some of her warrior's fury softened into something like understanding. Which is why we fight him, why we protect this world from gods and monsters both. But you, Kratos, you are both god and monster. How do we trust you won't become what you claim to oppose? The question hung in the recycled air of the watchtower like a blade suspended by spider silk. How many times had Kratos asked himself the same thing? In the long nights after Olympus burned, after Athena's spirit had shown him the cycle of violence gods perpetuated, after he'd tried and failed to die and leave the world free of his curse. You don't, Kratos said simply. Trust is for fools and the faithful. I am neither. Then we have a problem, Batman stated, and Kratos heard the click of some mechanism in the Dark Knight's gauntlet. Contingency activated. Because we can't let a god killer with your power walk freely on Earth without... The watchtower's alarm screamed. Red light bathed the observation deck as holographic displays erupted across every surface. A voice, cold, artificial, belonging to the watchtower's AI, announced the impossible. Boom tube signatures detected, multiple targets. Origin, Apocalypse. Destination, New Genesis. Scale, Invasion Fleet. Superman was already moving toward the command console, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. Orion's world. Darkseid's launching a full assault on his son's adopted home. Why now? Diana demanded, but her hand was already on her sword. Warrior first, diplomat second. Batman's eyes found Kratos through the crimson emergency lighting. Because you arrived. Darkseid doesn't believe in coincidence. He saw a god-killer enter his universe and decided to make a move while we're distracted assessing the threat. Or, a new voice boomed through the watchtower speakers, resonating with power that made the station itself vibrate. Why? Because Darkseid recognizes opportunity when the source provides it. The boom tube opened inside the watchtower, a breach of security that should have been impossible. Through it stepped a figure clad in red and blue armor, face hidden behind a helmet that burned with divine fury barely contained. Behind him, the swirling portal showed glimpses of a world under siege, golden spires crumbling under paradamant assault, new gods fighting with desperate valor against overwhelming numbers. I am Orion, the warrior proclaimed, and Kratos recognized a kindred spirit instantly. Another son trying to escape his father's shadow, another weapon pointed at the darkness. Son of Darkseid, warrior of New Genesis. My father besieges my adopted home, and I sense in you, stranger, the power to tip the balance. Will you fight beside gods, or watch another pantheon fall? The Trinity exchanged glances, a conversation in microseconds that spoke of years fighting together. Superman's hope, Diana's warrior calculation, Batman's tactical assessment. They reached consensus without words. Orion, Superman said, we can't just... There's no time for debate, Kryptonian, Orion snarled, and his helmet opened to reveal a face twisted with barely controlled rage that Kratos knew too well from his own reflection. Every second we waste, my people die. You claim to protect the innocent. Prove it. Kratos felt the blades of chaos warm against his back, eager for battle, always eager. A new world, new gods, but the same eternal conflict. Tyrants seeking dominion, warriors standing against the dark. He had wanted peace, had tried to leave violence behind. But peace, it seemed, it was never an option for men like him. I will fight, Kratos said, and the Trinity turned to him as one. Not for your trust, Amazon, Not for your cause, Kryptonian. Not for your approval, detective. But because I know tyrant gods, and they must always be opposed. Batman's mouth tightened behind his cowl. That's not... It's enough, Superman interrupted, and there was steel beneath the hope now. Orion, open the boom tube. Diana, signal the rest of the League. Bruce, prepare. Already done, Batman growled, pulling weapons from his belt that hummed with energies designed to hurt gods. But I'm tagging our new ally with a tracer. Non-negotiable. Kratos felt the Dark Knight attach something to his armor. Small, unobtrusive. A leash disguised as precaution. He allowed it. Trust was earned through battle. And these heroes had not yet seen what the ghost of Sparta could do when unleashed against those who deserved his fury. The boom tube expanded, showing New Genesis burning, paradise under siege, another heaven falling to another tyrant's ambition. Kratos had ended one pantheon's reign. Perhaps in this strange universe of hope and shadows, he could help save another. Or perhaps he would simply prove Diana's fears correct and become the monster this world needed him to be. The blades sang as he drew them. Superman's eyes widened at the infernal fire dancing along their edges. Wonder Woman's hand tightened on her sword, ready. Batman's finger hovered over whatever contingency he'd prepared. For New Genesis, Orion declared. For Earth, Superman added. Kratos said nothing. He simply walked through the portal toward the sound of war. And the Trinity followed, gods and mortals alike marching into a battle that would determine whether a god-killer could become something more, or whether he would remain exactly what his blades had always made him, death incarnate. New Genesis burned with a beauty that offended Kratos' understanding of war. Even in destruction, Highfather's world maintained an elegance that Olympus had never possessed. Golden spires toppled in mathematically perfect arcs, crystal gardens shattered into prismatic dust that caught the light of dying energy shields. And the new gods themselves fell with a grace that came from divinity too refined to understand true brutality. Kratos hit the ground running, blades already carving through the first wave of parademons that swarmed like locusts made of hate and hunger. These creatures were different from the scattered scouts in Metropolis. Organized, relentless, backed by technology that crackled with the same dimensional energies that had torn him from his world. Their armor absorbed impacts that should have shattered bone. But the blades of chaos had been forged to kill immortals. Infernal fire bit through alien metal, and the parademons learned what Olympus had learned. Some weapons were made to end gods, and their servants died just as easily. Superman blazed across the sky like a comet of hope, heat vision carving precise lines through the invasion force. He pulled new gods from collapsing buildings with impossible speed, positioned himself between civilians and omega beams, fought like a god who had never forgotten he was raised human. Every movement spoke of restraint, power controlled, a death avoided when possible, even enemies treated as lives that might be saved rather than problems to be eliminated. It disgusted Kratos almost as much as it impressed him. Wonder Woman fought like the warrior goddess she was, sword dancing through parademon ranks with Amazonian precision, lassos snaring flight-capable enemies and hurling them into each other with calculated efficiency. But where Superman showed mercy, Diana showed honor. Enemies who surrendered lived. Those who pressed attack found her blade. No hesitation, no apology. War conducted with ancient principles that Kratos recognized from his Spartan training before godhood had complicated everything. Batman moved through the chaos like shadow given purpose. No superhuman strength, no divine heritage, just human ingenuity weaponized against impossible odds. Explosive batarangs disrupted parademon formations. Smoke pellets provided cover for retreating new gods. Some device in his gauntlet emitted a frequency that caused the invader's armor to seize, turning soldiers into statues for Superman to collect. The Dark Knight fought smarter than the gods around him, and that made him the most dangerous thing on the battlefield besides Kratos himself. Orion was pure rage wrapped in divine flesh. His astro force, the cosmic energy inherited from Darkseid and honed on New Genesis, erupted in crimson lances that vaporized parademons by the dozen. He flew on a disk that responded to thought, weapons appearing from nothing, eyes blazing with fury that needed no helmet to magnify. This was a son fighting to destroy everything his father represented, and Kratos understood that battle intimately. "To a ghost of Sparta!" Orion's voice cut through the screaming wind and weapons fire. "The central spire, Darkseid's elite guard is breaking through. If they reach the Source Temple, all is lost." Kratos didn't ask what a Source Temple was, didn't need to understand new god theology to recognize sacred ground worth defending. He'd learned that lesson when Athena's temple had fallen to his own rage. Some mistakes taught you precisely what mattered. He ran. The blades of chaos extended on their chains, hooking architecture and pulling him forward with momentum that built into something beyond mortal speed. Parademons tried to intercept. He swung through them like a pendulum of death, blades carving arcs that left bodies falling in his wake. A larger warrior, some parademon champion in ornate armor, blocked his path with an axe that crackled with the same Omega energy he'd seen Darkseid's scouts use. The creature swung. Kratos caught the axe handle between his blades, twisted, and felt the satisfying snap of alien bone. His boot found the champion's knee, inverting the joint. As it fell, he drove both blades through its skull and used the corpse as a springboard, launching himself toward the spire's entrance, where three figures waited. These weren't parademons, these were new gods, the female Furies, Darkseid's personal assassins. Kratos knew elite warriors when he saw them, had faced enough of Ares' champions to recognize professionals. The leader wore armor that seemed to absorb light itself, twin blades humming with molecular disruption fields. Her companions flanked with practiced precision, one wielding energy whips that could flay flesh from bone, the other bearing a staff that warped space around its head. The God Killer, the leader, Lashina, though Kratos didn't know her name, purred with anticipation. "Darkseid offers you a choice, weapon of Olympus. Join us, serve the true power, and know glory beyond your murdered pantheon's dreams. Refuse, and we add your head to our Lord's collection." Kratos' response was the blades of chaos screaming toward her throat. Lashina blocked with speed that matched his own, molecular blades meeting infernal fire in an explosion that cratered the golden platform beneath them. Her companions attacked in synchronized assault, whips wrapping around his left arm, staff creating gravitational distortions that should have crushed his spine. Should have. Kratos had fought the Furies of Greek myth, beings who tormented Oathbreakers with cosmic authority. These new god versions were faster, better armed, backed by technology that made Hephaestus's forges look primitive. But they had never faced someone who had killed the concept of fate itself. He yanked the whip wielder off balance, using her own weapon's tension to pull her into Lashina's counterstrike. Molecular blades meant for Kratos carved through her ally instead, and the Fury's scream ended in a wet gurgle. The staff-bearer tried to increase gravity around him, but Kratos had broken free of Atlas's hold. No new god trick would pin him down. He rolled through the distortion, came up inside her guard, and drove his blade through the gap between helmet and gorget. A divine blood, or whatever powered these beings, sprayed across golden architecture. Lashina fought with the fury her name implied, but fury was Kratos' native language. They traded blows that would have killed lesser beings, blades moving faster than mortal eyes could track. She was good, trained by Granny Goodness, tempered in Apocalypse's fire pits, given weapons that could cut dimensions. But Kratos had been forged in his family's ashes and tempered in the blood of Olympus. His blade found the seam in her armor, punched through and twisted. Lashina gasped, surprise, pain, and something like respect mingling in her final expression. "Darkseid will enjoy killing you. He is welcome to try," Kratos said, and pushed her body off the spire's edge. Behind him, a slow clap echoed through the smoke and chaos. "Oh, it's magnificent!" The voice resonated with power that made Kratos' divine blood recognize a threat beyond anything he'd faced in this new universe. "Granny Goodness trains them for decades, and you dispatch them in minutes. Perhaps my father sees more clearly than I credited." The figure that emerged from the Source Temple's entrance stood 7 feet tall, wrapped in crimson and gold armor that pulsed with barely contained energy. His face was aristocratic, handsome in the way Ares had been handsome. divine features hiding monstrous purpose. But his eyes burned with the same red fury that Orion struggled to contain. Calabac! Batman's voice crackled through a communicator. Kratos hadn't noticed Superman attached to his armor. Darkseid's firstborn, strength class 7, regeneration factor, loyalty to his father absolute. A fallback. You can't take him alone. Kratos crushed the communicator between armored fingers. He'd had enough of gods telling him what he could and couldn't kill. Calabac smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. The detective's right, of course. I am my father's fury given form, his first son, his truest weapon. Orion may deny his heritage, but I embrace it. And you, Ghost of Sparta, you will be my gift to Darkseid, proof that even god-killers kneel before apocalypse. He charged with speed that shouldn't have been possible for something his size. Kratos barely got his blades up in time to catch the massive fist that would have caved in his skull. The impact drove him backward, boots carving trenches in the golden platform, arms screaming protest against strength that exceeded even Zeus's direct assault. This was no parademon, no elite guard. This was a god's firstborn, and he hit like divine wrath. Calabac pressed the advantage, each blow a thunderclap, each strike forcing Kratos to give ground. The blades of chaos bit into his armor and drew blood that steamed in New Genesis's refined air. But the wounds closed almost instantly. Regeneration. Of course, Darkseid's son would heal like Kratos himself could, turning every battle into a war of attrition. You killed your father, Calabac laughed, landing a hit that sent Kratos sprawling. I heard the whispers when you arrived, the ghost who ended Zeus. But you don't understand true power, Spartan. My father is beyond death, beyond defeat. He is entropy incarnate, and I am his weapon. Kratos rose, spitting blood, feeling ribs crack back into place. I have heard gods brag before. They all die the same. He attacked with Spartan rage building in his chest, that familiar fury that turned him into something beyond god or mortal, into pure violence given purpose. The blades of chaos became extensions of his will, carving patterns that had felled titans and Olympians. Calabac met him blow for blow, neither giving quarter, both too proud to retreat. Around them, New Genesis continued burning. Superman pulled survivors from rubble while fighting off parademon swarms. Wonder Woman dueled 3 more Furies in the crystalline gardens, her sword ringing against their exotic weapons. Batman coordinated new god defenders, turning chaos into organized resistance. And Orion descended from the sky like the wrath of heaven, Astroforce blazing, eyes fixed on his half-brother with hatred that transcended mere violence. Calabac, Orion's voice shook the very platform. You defile our father's war with your presence. This battle is between Darkseid and me. Leave the Spartan and face your brother. Calabac's smile widened. Ah, brother, still pretending New Genesis made you better than your blood? Still denying what we are? He gestured at Kratos. Ask the God-Killer what sons inevitably become. Ask him how his father's sins tainted him beyond redemption. The words hit harder than any blow. Kratos saw Orion's rage falter for just an instant, doubt creeping in, fear that Darkseid's blood made him inevitable monster rather than chosen hero. He'd seen that same doubt in his own reflection too many times to count. Your blood does not define you, Kratos said, surprising himself with the words. Your choices do. I learned that too late. However, you still have time. Calabac laughed. Philosophy from a mass murderer. Beautiful. Darkseid will treasure this before he breaks you. Above them, reality cracked. Not a boom tube. Something worse. The sky split with light so absolute it bleached color from the world, and through it descended a figure that made every god on the battlefield, New Genesis and Apocalypse alike, freeze in recognition. High Father, Lord of New Genesis, the Source's chosen voice. And he looked directly at Kratos with eyes that held both judgment and terrible understanding. High Father's presence ended the battle through sheer gravitational authority. Parademons retreated in organized formation, responding to some signal Kratos couldn't detect. Calabac snarled but stepped back, his loyalty to Darkseid's tactical genius overriding his desire to continue the fight. Even the female Furies who had been pressing Wonder Diana melted into boom tubes, their mission, whatever it truly was, apparently complete. The Lord of New Genesis descended on a platform of pure light, staff in hand that hummed with the same fundamental energy Kratos had felt when the Titans wielded creation itself. But where the Greek primordials had been raw chaos given form, Highfather radiated order, terrible, absolute order that came from being connected to something called the source that Batman's briefing had mentioned, but Kratos hadn't fully understood. He understood it now. Looking at Highfather was like staring into the fundamental mathematics of existence itself. Ghost of Sparta, Highfather's voice resonated through dimensions Kratos couldn't name. Kratos, son of Zeus, murderer of the Olympian pantheon, a weapon forged in familial ash and tempered in divine blood. The source whispers your name in languages that predate your universe's formation. Superman landed beside Kratos, protective despite the obvious power differential. Highfather, he fought for New Genesis, killed the Furies, held the line against Kalibak. He did, Highfather acknowledged, and his gaze never left Kratos. But why? Not for glory. You've tasted godhood and found it poison. Not for redemption. You believe yourself beyond such grace. Not for loyalty. You've known too much betrayal to trust these heroes you've just met. So why, Kratos? Why fight for gods again when you've spent lifetimes tearing pantheons down? The question hung in New Genesis's smoke-stained air. Wonder Woman watched him with her hand still on her sword. Batman's cowl remained fixed on him, a no-doubt recording every micro-expression for analysis. Orion's rage had cooled to something like curiosity, waiting to see if the God-Killer would prove worthy of the respect Kratos had offered him. Because Darkseid is a tyrant, Kratos said simply, and tyrants must be opposed. Always. Even when opposing them means fighting alongside gods you don't trust, alongside a trinity that could, in time, become the very tyrants you fear? Kratos felt his jaw tighten. Especially then. If they fall, better I am close enough to kill them quickly. Batman's hand moved toward his belt. Superman's expression shifted to something between hurt and understanding. Wonder Woman's eyes narrowed with Warrior's assessment. But Highfather smiled. Honest, brutal, practical. But you are precisely what the source suggested you might be. A weapon that cuts both ways. Dangerous to enemy and ally alike. The ancient new god gestured, and the devastation around them seemed to freeze. Come, walk with me, Kratos. The source has shown me fragments of your arrival, glimpses of why the dimensional fabric tore to bring you here. We must speak of things the Justice League is not yet ready to understand. I don't take orders from gods anymore, Kratos growled. I am not ordering, I am inviting. There is a difference, though I suspect your experience with divine beings makes such distinctions difficult to perceive. Highfather turned, already walking toward the Source Temple. The choice is yours, but know that Darkseid's retreat was not defeat. It was reconnaissance. He wanted to see you fight. To measure your capacity for violence. To determine if you are weapon to be claimed or threat to be eliminated. Let him come, Kratos said. But even as he spoke, he felt unease settle in his gut. Darkseid was different from the Olympians. They had been powerful, but ultimately predictable. Zeus's pride, Ares's rage, Hades's bitterness. But Darkseid, the way the parademons moved, the precision of the Furies' assault, the tactical retreat the moment Highfather arrived. This was a god who thought, who planned, who would study Kratos the way Batman studied threats, looking for weaknesses to exploit. I'll come, Kratos said, but they come with me. He gestured at the Trinity. No private conferences with gods who speak in riddles. I've played that game before. Highfather's smile deepened. Wise. Yes, let Superman's hope, Wonder Woman's warrior instinct, and Batman's suspicion all bear witness. Perhaps that is precisely what the Source intended. The Source Temple's interior defied architecture. Walls that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Kratos' senses could properly interpret. Light that came from everywhere and nowhere. And at the chamber's heart, a pool of absolute darkness that somehow radiated illumination. The Source Wall, Batman would later explain, was the edge of creation itself. This temple connected to it through faith and physics in equal measure. High Father stood at the pool's edge, staff planted, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of prophecy. The fourth world, New Genesis and Apocalypse, locked in eternal war, exists in balance. Light and dark, hope and tyranny, order and chaos. For millennia, this balance has held, on neither side capable of true victory. But something has changed. The anti-life equation, which Darkseid has sought across galaxies and dimensions, has begun to resonate with new possibility. Because of me, Kratos said. It wasn't a question. Because of what you represent, Highfather corrected. You are proof that gods can die. Not temporarily, not symbolically, but truly and completely. You ended an entire pantheon, not through cosmic accident or reality restructuring, but through pure, focused will to destroy divine tyranny. Darkseid sees in you the final component he needs. Batman's detective instincts activated immediately. The anti-life equation requires proof that even divine will can be broken. Kratos broke the Greek god's will to exist. If Darkseid can capture that essence, a weaponized Kratos' god-killing nature, he could rewrite the equation to account for divine resistance. Wonder Woman finished, horror dawning in her ancient eyes. Every pantheon, every cosmic entity, every being that draws power from worship or faith, all would fall under the anti-life equation's dominion. Superman's fist clenched. We can't let that happen. No, Highfather agreed, but neither can we simply eliminate the variable. Kratos' presence in this universe is not accident. The source does not operate through coincidence. He was brought here for a purpose, though whether that purpose serves light or dark remains to be determined. I serve no one's purpose but my own, Kratos snarled. But even as he spoke, he remembered Athena's ghost revealing that the gods had manipulated him from birth, that his entire existence had been orchestrated to become the perfect weapon. Was this universe simply another cage? Another pantheon using him for their cosmic games? Then prove it, Highfather said, and his tone shifted from prophetic to challenging. The source offers you trial by combat, not against me, not against Darkseid, but against one who walks the same path you do, a warrior seeking to escape his father's shadow, fighting to prove that blood does not equal destiny. Orion stepped forward from where he'd been standing guard at the temple's entrance. His helmet retracted fully, revealing a face twisted between noble purpose and barely suppressed rage. You spoke truth during our battle with Kalibak. Blood does not define us, choices do. I choose every day not to become my father, not to let his rage consume me as it consumed him. But I am not sure I believe my own words. He gestured at the source pool, and images formed in its darkness. Orion in battle, fury building, enemies not just defeated, but obliterated. Orion standing over New Genesis's enemies, with the same cruel smile Darkseid wore. Orion's hands stained with blood that looked too much like murder rather than warfare. I am Darkseid's biological son, Orion continued, voice raw with pain Kratos recognized. Traded to Highfather in the pact that ended the last great war, raised here to be a force for good, trained to oppose my father's tyranny. But the rage, it never leaves. Every battle, I feel it pulling me toward becoming exactly what I fight against. And you think fighting me will what? Prove you're better than your blood? Kratos asked. No, Orion said. I think fighting you will show me if it's even possible to escape what we are. You killed your father, killed your entire pantheon trying to outrun the monster they made you. And yet here you stand, blades of chaos still burning, still ready to kill, still drowning in the same violence you supposedly escaped. If you cannot truly change, how can I? The challenge struck deeper than any of Kalibak's blows, because Orion was right. Kratos had ended the Olympians, had tried to leave the god of war behind, had even attempted to build a new life in the Norse realms. But the blades had followed. The violence had followed. The curse of being a weapon had followed. Could he ever truly be anything else? This trial serves a purpose beyond your personal struggles, Highfather interjected. Darkseid watches New Genesis even now, measuring, calculating. He saw you fight the Furies in Kalabak with skill born from divine slaughter. But he does not yet know your limits, does not know if you can control your rage or if it controls you. If you face Orion, my greatest warrior, the son I shaped to oppose his biological father, and can fight with discipline rather than fury, with purpose rather than rage, you prove yourself more than weapon. And if I can't, Kratos demanded, then you prove Darkseid correct, that you are simply a weapon to be claimed by whoever wields you best, and weapons eventually are always pointed at their owners. Highfather's eyes glowed with source light. The choice is yours, Ghost of Sparta. Fight my son and prove you've evolved beyond what the Greek gods made you. Or refuse, and spend your time in this universe wondering if you're simply repeating the cycle in a different pantheon. Batman's voice cut through the tension. This is a test, for both of them. Highfather, you're trying to determine if Orion can face his rage without Darkseid's influence corrupting him, and if Kratos represents evolution or simply better armed destruction. The detective sees clearly, Highfather acknowledged. As always. Superman stepped forward, hope and concern warring in his expression. There has to be another way. We don't need to set warriors against each other to prove. Yes, we do, Wonder Woman interrupted, and her Amazon pragmatism silenced even the Man of Steel. Kratos is right. Trust is earned in battle. Orion needs to know if he can face someone who has become everything he fears turning into and still maintain control. And we need to know if Kratos will be ally or eventual threat. She turned to Kratos, warrior to warrior. In my culture, trial by combat is sacred, not for entertainment, not for dominance, but to reveal truth that words cannot convey. Fight with honor, Ghost of Sparta. Show us if the man remains beneath the weapon's edge. Kratos looked at Orion, saw the same desperation he'd felt 1,000 times, the same fear that blood would win over choice, that destiny was simply tyranny wearing a gentler mask. Part of him wanted to refuse, to deny these new gods the satisfaction of watching him perform like a trained monster. But a larger part recognized the opportunity. If he could face Orion and not lose himself to the rage that had defined him for so long, if he could prove that fighting didn't have to mean becoming the monster, maybe there was hope for redemption after all, or maybe he would simply confirm what he'd always suspected, that the ghost of Sparta was all that remained, and Kratos, the man, the father, the Spartan who had existed before the gods broke him, was as dead as the pantheon he'd murdered. I accept, Kratos said, and drew the blades of chaos. But know this, Orion, I will not hold back. If you want to see if you can control your rage, you'll have to do it while facing mine. Orion's smile was terrible and beautiful, hope and fury balanced on a knife's edge. I would expect nothing less, God-killer. Highfather raised his staff, and the Source Temple's geometry shifted, once expanding into an arena that existed between dimensions. Around them, the Justice League took position as witnesses. Batman's hand remained on his belt, ready to intervene. Superman's eyes glowed faintly with heat vision held in check. Wonder Woman stood with arms crossed, judgment suspended, waiting to see what truth combat would reveal. In the distance, beyond dimensions and the veil between worlds, Darkseid watched through technologies that bent space and time. His smile was stone and shadow, because whether Kratos won or lost, whether Orion maintained control or succumbed to rage, the Lord of Apocalypse would learn exactly what he needed to know. The Source had brought the God-killer to this universe for a reason. Now two father-sons would determine if that reason served light or darkness. The battle for Kratos' soul, and perhaps the universe's fate, was about to begin. The arena materialized around them, not the golden perfection of New Genesis's architecture, but something primal. Raw stone beneath their feet, sky above showing stars from galaxies that existed only in the Source's memory, and between Kratos and Orion, 50 feet of space that would soon be painted with divine blood. Batman's voice crackled through communicators distributed to the observers. Non-lethal, that's the only rule. First blood, submission, or incapacitation. We're not executing either of you to prove a philosophical point. Agreed, Highfather said, though his tone suggested he would accept whatever outcome the Source deemed necessary. Kratos rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of the blades of chaos. Non-lethal. The restriction felt alien after centuries of killing gods and monsters. But he understood the purpose. This wasn't about death, it was about control. About proving he could choose restraint when rage screamed for annihilation. Orion's astroforce manifested around his fists, crimson energy that responded to emotion as much as will. His helmet had retracted fully, and Kratos could see the internal war playing across his features. Darkseid's cruel angles warring with Highfather's noble bearing. Rage and discipline locked in eternal contest. "I have fought my father's nature every day of my existence," Orion said, voice carrying across the arena. "Granny Goodness tortured me as a child on Apocalypse, trying to forge me into Darkseid's weapon. Highfather saved me, taught me to channel rage into righteous fury. But the darkness never leaves. It whispers that I am simply delaying the inevitable, that I will become my father no matter how hard I resist." "I know that whisper," Kratos replied. "It has my family's voices." Orion nodded, understanding passing between them. Two men haunted by paternal sins, two weapons trying to remember they were once human, or in Orion's case, trying to become more than the monster his genetics suggested. "Then let us see," Orion said, and his astro force blazed brighter. "Which of us has better learned to master the darkness inside?" He attacked with speed that matched the Furies, astro force propelling him forward in a crimson blur. Kratos barely got his blades up in time, infernal fire meeting cosmic energy in an explosion that cracked the arena's stone floor. The impact drove him backward, boots carving trenches, the arms screaming against strength that rivaled Zeus himself. But where Zeus had relied on raw divine might, Orion fought with tactical precision. Each blow tested Kratos' defenses, probing for weaknesses, using superior speed to attack from multiple angles. The new god wasn't just powerful. He was trained, disciplined, channeling overwhelming strength through refined technique. Kratos adapted. Let the Spartan warrior training rise through the divine rage, remembered the phalanx formations and shield work that had made him legendary before godhood complicated everything. The blades of chaos weren't just weapons of chaos, they were extensions of will, and will could be disciplined. He caught Orion's next strike on crossed blades, redirected the energy rather than absorbing it, and used the new god's momentum to spin him off balance. His boot found Orion's ribs, not enough to break, but enough to drive air from divine lungs. Orion rolled with the impact, came up firing astroforce bolts that Kratos barely dodged. "Good," Orion grunted, wiping blood from his lip. "You fight like a soldier, not just a berserker. I was afraid this would be too easy." "I was a Spartan before I was a god," Kratos said, already moving, blades spinning in patterns designed to confuse and overwhelm. "We are taught discipline before we are taught to kill." Their battle intensified. Orion's flying disc materialized, giving him three-dimensional mobility that Kratos couldn't match. But the ghost of Sparta had fought enemies who could fly. Gods, titans, creatures that defied gravity through divine right. He used the arena's geometry, wall running with momentum that let him meet Orion midair, blades hooking the disc and pulling them both crashing to stone. They grappled on the ground, Olympian strength against new god physiology, both bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, neither willing to yield. This close, Kratos could see Orion's eyes. And the terrible thing he saw there was hope. Hope that this fight would prove something, that the discipline would hold, that he wasn't doomed to become Darkseid. It reminded Kratos too much of his own desperate need for redemption that had driven him through pantheons and realms, always searching for proof that he could be more than the weapon the gods had forged. Orion broke the grapple with a burst of astroforce that sent them both tumbling apart. When he rose, his breathing was ragged but controlled. "You're holding back. I can feel it. The rage inside you. It's screaming to be released. It isn't it? The same way mine demands I stop playing at restraint and simply crush you." "Yes," Kratos admitted, surprising himself with honesty. "Every strike I pull, every killing blow I convert to bruising impact. The blades want divine blood. They always do." "Then why resist?" Orion's voice carried genuine curiosity beneath the challenge. "We are weapons, you and I, forged by fathers who saw us as tools. Why pretend we're anything else?" The question hung between them, and Kratos felt the Justice League's attention sharpen. Batman leaning forward, analyzing. Superman's hope warring with concern. Wonder Woman's warrior assessment waiting to see which way this philosophical blade would cut. Because, Kratos said slowly, tasting each word, I have a son. The admission shocked him almost as much as his audience. He'd kept Atreus secret, buried the memories of his Norse life deep where this universe's gods couldn't touch them. But the truth demanded voice. In another realm, another time, I tried to leave the ghost of Sparta behind, became a father again, taught him to hunt, to survive, to be better than I was. And when he discovered his divine heritage, when he felt godhood's call, I had to show him that power without discipline is simply tyranny waiting to happen. Kratos' blades lowered slightly, though he remained ready for attack. I failed my first family because I couldn't control the rage. I will not fail the second by pretending it doesn't exist. We master the darkness by acknowledging it, not by pretending we've evolved beyond it. Orion stood perfectly still, Astroforce flickering around his fists as understanding dawned. You fight with restraint not because you've conquered your rage, but because you've accepted it. You know what you are, and you choose to be better anyway. Every day, Kratos confirmed, some days I succeed, some days I fail, but I choose. That is the only freedom we have, the choice to resist what we were made to be. Highfather's voice resonated across the arena. The source reveals truth in unexpected forms. Continue. They fought again, but something had shifted. No longer a contest of pure dominance, but a demonstration of will. Orion pressed his attack with fury that would have overwhelmed lesser opponents, but now Kratos could see the control beneath the rage. Each strike was chosen, each burst of Astroforce calculated for impact without permanent damage, and Orion could see the same in Kratos, the god killer pulling his blows, converting fatal strikes into bruising impacts, fighting with the discipline of a Spartan warrior rather than divine destroyers abandoned. They were mirrors reflecting each other's struggle, and in that reflection both found something unexpected. Not weakness, but strength. The strength to choose restraint when violence would be easier. The strength to acknowledge the darkness without being consumed by it. Kratos saw his opening, Orion slightly overextended on a flying charge. Astroforce concentrated forward, back vulnerable for a fraction of a second. The blades of chaos could hook his spine, drag him down, end this fight with bone-breaking impact that would leave him conscious but beaten. He took it. Chains extended with perfect precision, wrapped around Orion's torso, and yanked him from the sky. The new god hit stone hard enough to crack it, breath exploding from his lungs, Astroforce flickering as consciousness wavered. But Kratos didn't follow up, didn't drive his boot into a vulnerable throat or press blades to divine flesh. He simply held Orion pinned, chains tight but not crushing, victory claimed without devastation. Yield, Kratos said quietly. You've proven what you needed to prove. Orion's eyes blazed with fury for an instant, rage at being beaten, pride wounded, Darkseid's blood screaming for vengeance. Kratos saw it all play across his features, saw the internal war reach its climax. And then Orion smiled, savage, relieved, genuinely joyful. I yield, Ghost of Sparta. Well fought. The chains retracted. Kratos offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Orion clasped it. Two warriors, two father's sons, sure both blooded and beaten, but somehow more whole than when they'd begun. Superman was down from the observation platform before Highfather could speak, hands already glowing with residual heat vision, ready to cauterize wounds. Are you both? We are fine, Kryptonian, Orion said, laughing despite cracked ribs. Better than fine. The Spartan has shown me something I had forgotten, that accepting our nature does not mean surrendering to it. Batman's voice cut through the moment with typical pragmatism. Touching. Highfather, did your test provide the results you wanted? The ancient new god descended, staff planted, expression unreadable behind his beard and source wisdom. The source shows me fragments, detective, not certainties. But yes, Kratos has demonstrated that he is more than simple weapon. He can choose restraint. He can fight with purpose beyond destruction. can perhaps be trusted. Perhaps, Batman echoed, and his hand remained on his belt. Wonder Woman approached, warrior respect evident in her stance. You fought with honor, both of you. Kratos, I owe you apology. I saw only the god killer, not the man who chose to become more. In my culture, such evolution is sacred. You have earned consideration, if not yet full trust. I ask for neither, Kratos replied. Trust is earned over time. I have eternity to prove myself or damn myself. Today was simply today. But today revealed something Darkseid needed to see, Highfather said, and his tone carried warning. He watched this battle through technologies and scrying beyond your comprehension. He now knows that you can be controlled, that restraint is possible, or that you are not simply rage incarnate. And that makes me more valuable to him, Kratos understood immediately. A weapon that can think is more useful than one that simply destroys. Precisely. The invasion of New Genesis was not about conquest. It was about forcing you to reveal yourself. Now Darkseid will adjust his approach. He will not simply try to destroy you or mindlessly recruit you. He will craft something more insidious. Batman's cowl tilted. A scenario where Kratos' choice to fight with restraint becomes his weakness. We're caring about collateral damage, about protecting innocence, about proving he's more than monster, where all of that becomes leverage. The detective sees the trap before it closes. Highfather acknowledged. Darkseid is many things, but never predictable in method, only in goal. He seeks the anti-life equation, and now he knows that Kratos represents a component he has never possessed. Proof that even God-killers can choose mercy, which means proof that mercy can be weaponized, Superman said, horror dawning. If Darkseid can corrupt Kratos' redemption, twist his choice to be better into a tool for enslaving others, then the anti-life equation gains a component designed specifically to break divine will that has learned restraint. Wonder Woman finished. Gods who have evolved beyond tyranny would be more vulnerable than those who never questioned their nature. Orion's fist clenched around his astroforce. My father's genius. He doesn't just want to dominate, he wants to corrupt the very concept of redemption itself. To prove that choosing to be better is simply another form of weakness to be exploited. Kratos felt ice settle in his chest. He'd escaped one pantheon's manipulation only to walk directly into another's trap. Darkseid had seen him fight with discipline and concluded not that he was threat, but that he was a sophisticated tool waiting for proper application. Then what do I do? The question came out harder than intended. Prove I can't control my rage? Become the monster Darkseid expects? That serves him just as well. A god killer without restraint is still a weapon pointed at divine authority. No, Highfather said. You do what all beings seeking freedom must do. You choose your own path, regardless of how gods and tyrants try to use your choices. You fight when fighting is right. You show mercy when mercy is wise. You accept that your every action may be turned against you, and you act with honor anyway. That's asking him to be Superman, Batman pointed out, and even Clark struggles with that burden. Superman's expression was serious, tinged with understanding that came from years of being pulled between hope and pragmatism. It's not about being perfect, it's about trying, every day, even when you fail, especially when you fail. He looked at Kratos directly. You've got a son you're trying to be better for. That's more purpose than I had when I started. Use it. Kratos met the Kryptonian's eyes, saw genuine belief there, hope that probably shouldn't exist in anyone who'd seen as much darkness as Superman had witnessed. But it did exist, stubborn and unshakable. And something in Kratos responded to it despite every cynical impulse screaming that hope was simply delayed disappointment. Fine, Kratos said. I'll try your way, Kryptonian. Fight with honor. Protect the innocent. Prove I'm more than weapon. But know this. If Darkseid comes for me, if he tries to use my restraint against the people I've agreed to protect, I will become exactly what he fears. The ghost of Sparta does not negotiate with tyrants. Nor should he, Wonder Woman said. But perhaps with allies, with purpose beyond vengeance, you won't have to face him alone. Orion clasped Kratos' shoulder, gripped tight with warrior's respect. You taught me something today, Ghost of Sparta. Let me return the lesson. In the Fourth World's War, isolation is death. New Genesis stands with you against my father's schemes. And perhaps, when the final battle comes, you'll teach Darkseid what every tyrant eventually learns. What's that? Superman asked. Kratos' smile was sharp as his blades. That some weapons eventually turn on their masters. Above them, beyond dimensions in the veil between worlds, Darkseid observed and calculated. The God-Killer had chosen restraint, had proven himself controlled weapon rather than wild destroyer. Perfect. Controlled weapons could be redirected. Disciplined killers could be given targets that would break their newfound morality and return them to pure destructive purpose. All Darkseid needed was the proper motivation, the right threat, the perfect scenario where Kratos' choice to protect would force him to become the monster again. And in Gotham City, where shadows bred monsters and hope struggled against eternal night, and that scenario was already being prepared. The Lord of Apocalypse had allies in unexpected places, and the Ghost of Sparta was about to discover that not all tyrants wore armor and fired Omega beams. Some wore smiles and called themselves Joker. The boom tube deposited them back on Earth 3 hours after the battle on New Genesis. Though time, Batman explained, moved differently between Fourth World dimensions and Prime Earth. What felt like an afternoon of combat and philosophical warfare had consumed barely 90 minutes of Gotham's eternal night. Kratos stood on the Watchtower's observation deck, studying the planet below. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds masking the violence and suffering that bred in every shadow. Deceptive, like Athena's wisdom had been deceptive, he hiding manipulation beneath reasonable words. Penny for your thoughts? Superman's voice carried none of the commanding presence he'd shown during battle. Up here, away from immediate crisis, he was simply Clark, a farm boy who happened to move planets, trying to understand a god-killer who'd been offered redemption. This world, Kratos said, it looks clean from here, pure, but I've seen enough of your cities to know the rot beneath. Gotham breeds monsters. Metropolis has villains who would make Olympus's worst look tame. Your dark side makes Ares look like a child playing with tin soldiers. Why do you fight for it? Clark was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years defending hope against impossible darkness. Because the rot doesn't define it. The people do. Every civilian you saved today in Metropolis. Every new god protected on New Genesis. They're not perfect, but they're trying. Most of them wake up every day and choose to be kind despite the darkness. That's worth protecting. Even when they fail, even when they become the very monsters you fight against? Especially then, Clark said firmly, because if we give up on redemption, if we decide some people are beyond saving, we become the tyrants we oppose. Darkseid believes free will is a disease. I believe it's sacred, which means people have to be free to choose wrong and then choose better. Kratos thought of Atreus, his son who'd briefly become drunk on divine power and needed guidance back to himself. Thought of his own journey from weapon to father, from ghost to something approaching human again. Your optimism is dangerous. At Kryptonian, it will get you killed. Maybe, Superman acknowledged with a slight smile, but it's also kept me human when I could have become a god. You of all people should understand that distinction. Before Kratos could respond, alarms shrieked through the watchtower. Batman's voice cut through the comm system with crisp urgency. Situation in Gotham. Mass breakout at Arkham Asylum. Joker, Scarecrow, Two-Face, Poison Ivy. Every A-list psychopath just walked out the front door. Gordon's calling for League assistance. Wonder Woman's voice joined the channel. Timing is suspicious. New Genesis attack, Kratos' trial, and now Arkham collapses? Someone's coordinating. Darkseid, Orion growled over the connection. He'd remained on New Genesis to coordinate defenses. But the Fourth World's communication technology linked them across dimensions. My father moves pieces across multiple boards simultaneously. The Arkham breakout is distraction or preparation, possibly both. Batman's tone sharpened. I'm handling Gotham. Superman, I need you on standby for meta-level threats. Diana, coordinate with the rest of the League. If this is apocalypse-related, we can't afford to cluster in one location. And me? Kratos asked. The silence that followed spoke volumes. The Justice League coordinating, each member assigned based on years of teamwork and trust. And Kratos, the unknown variable, the god killer who'd proven restraint but remained unpredictable. "You're with me," Batman said finally. "Gotham is where this started, where you first arrived, where the per demons attacked. If Darkseid's testing you, well, he'll want familiar ground. And if I'm wrong," the Dark Knight's pause carried implications. "Then you'll get to see how I handle monsters in my city. Consider it orientation." Superman's expression showed concern. "Bruce, are you sure that's—" "No," Batman interrupted. "But certainty is luxury we don't have. Kratos proved control on New Genesis. Let's see if he can maintain it in a city designed to break that control. Watchtower, transport 2 to Gotham. My coordinates." The world dissolved in light that tasted like electricity and possibility. When it reformed, Kratos stood in shadow so complete it felt like Hades' realm had bled into the mortal world. Buildings loomed like tombstones, Gothic architecture that predated the gleaming towers of Metropolis. And the air itself carried weight, corruption and suffering compressed into atmosphere. This was Gotham, and it felt like home in ways that made Kratos' skin crawl. Batman emerged from the darkness like he'd been part of it, cape blending seamlessly with the shadows that birthed him. "Welcome to my city. 3 rules. Don't kill anyone. Don't cause collateral damage I can't justify to Gordon. And if I give you an order in the field, you follow it immediately. Questions?" "Just one," Kratos said. "Why bring me here if you don't trust me?" Batman's cowl fixed on him, white lenses unreadable. "Because trust is binary thinking. I assess capabilities and motivations, then deploy assets accordingly. You're capable. That's not in question. Your motivation is proving you're more than weapon." Gotham is where that gets tested. The Batmobile materialized from an alley entrance Kratos hadn't noticed. Sleek, armored, bristling with technologies that made even his divine senses struggle to catalog all the weapon systems. Batman gestured toward the passenger side. "Get in." Arkham is 8 miles northeast. The breakout started 17 minutes ago, which means most inmates are already scattered through the Narrows. We need to contain before body count rises. Kratos climbed into the vehicle, noting the reinforced interior designed to survive impacts that would obliterate normal cars. Batman's hands moved across controls with practiced precision, and the Batmobile launched forward with acceleration that pressed Kratos back into his seat despite divine constitution. "Shudder, Arkham isn't just an asylum," Batman explained as they tore through Gotham's streets, the vehicle's ARREI, routing them around traffic with inhuman precision. "It's a symptom. Gotham produces monsters the way Metropolis produces hope. Something in the city's foundation. Maybe the Court of Owl's influence. Maybe older darkness. It calls to broken minds and breaks those who weren't already damaged." "And you fight this alone?" Kratos asked, watching the Gothic architecture blur past. "Not alone. I have family, allies. But yes, primarily I handle Gotham while the League manages global threats. It's my city, my responsibility." "Your punishment," Kratos said, recognizing the pattern. "You punish yourself for not saving your parents by trying to save everyone else. I know that cycle, Detective. It ends with you dead or worse." Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. "I'm aware of the risks. The alternative is letting Gotham consume itself while I hide behind League authority. I won't do that." The Batmobile's display lit up with incoming data, police scanners, security feeds, reports flooding in from across the city. Joker sighted in the Diamond District, Two-Face hitting a bank in Old Gotham, Poison Ivy's plants overrunning Robinson Park, Scarecrow's fear toxin dispersing in the Narrows. Too coordinated, too simultaneous. Batman had been right. Someone had orchestrated this, turned Arkham into a weapon aimed at Gotham's heart. "Oracle," Batman spoke into his comm. "I need pattern analysis, cross-reference breakout timing with boom tube signatures and apocalypse technology markers." A woman's voice, sharp, intelligent, underlying warmth beneath professional efficiency, responded immediately. "Already running it, Batman. Preliminary results show exotic energy signature at Arkham 30 seconds before the breakout. Matches New God technology, but wrong somehow. Like someone reverse-engineered a mother box and got it 90% correct. Darkseid doesn't do 90%, Batman muttered, which means someone on Earth is playing with fourth world tech they barely understand. Luthor? Negative. LexCorp security shows him in Metropolis, board meeting with witnesses. Besides, this feels wrong for his MO. He'd want credit for humiliating you. Kratos felt unease settle in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through wars against titans and gods. This isn't about the breakout. It's about drawing you out. He's making you choose. Batman's white lenses fixed on him briefly. Explain. Darkseid studied me on New Genesis, saw me fight with restraint, protect civilians, prove I could control my rage. Now he wants to know if I can maintain that control when innocent lives are the cost. Kratos' hands tightened into fists. He's testing you too, Detective, seeing if you'll trust me or if you'll activate whatever contingency you prepared. The Batmobile slowed as they approached Arkham's Gothic silhouette against Gotham's polluted sky. The asylum's front gates hung open, emergency lights strobing across empty yards where inmates should have been restrained. Too quiet, too empty. The contingency is already active, Batman admitted. Micro-explosive in the tracer I attached to your armor. Non-lethal, but sufficient to incapacitate if you lose control. I don't apologize for it. Good, Kratos said, surprising the detective. If I become the monster, kill me. I've lived too long to die a weapon without conscience. Batman's expression, what little Kratos could see beneath the cowl, shifted microscopically. Respect, perhaps, or simply recognition that Kratos understood the cost of power without control. The Batmobile's sensors screamed warning half a second before the gates exploded inward. Not with conventional explosives, but with energy that tasted like boom tubes and felt like new god technology corrupted into something wrong. Through the smoke stumbled figures that made Kratos reach for his blades on pure instinct. Not inmates, not parademons, something worse. Gotham's criminally insane augmented with technologies that pulsed with the same exotic energies that powered Apocalypse armies. Joker stood at their center, his smile somehow wider and more terrible than natural flesh should allow. Cybernetic implants crawled across half his face, one eye replaced with something that glowed with omega red energy. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic frequencies that hurt to hear, madness given technological amplification. Bats! And you brought a friend. How absolutely delightful. The Joker's augmented eye fixed on Kratos, and his smile grew impossibly wider. The ghost of Sparta himself. I've been reading up on you through our new friends' databases. You killed your whole family, started a war with the gods, murdered your way through an entire pantheon. We have so much in common. Batman was already out of the Batmobile, batarangs flying toward the augmented inmates. Joker, what did you do? What did I do? What did I do? Joker's laughter echoed with digital distortion. I made a deal with a charming gentleman from a fire and brimstone dimension. He offered me an upgrade, said something about testing a god-killer's restraint by giving him targets that blur the line between monster and victim. Isn't that poetic? Kratos emerged from the Batmobile, blades of chaos burning in his hands, and understood the trap immediately. The augmented inmates weren't responsible for their condition. Someone had weaponized them, turned Gotham's mentally ill into living bombs designed to force impossible choices. You see the problem, don't you, God Killer? Joker giggled, his augmented eye pulsing. Kill us, and you prove you're still the monster. Show restraint, and Gotham burns while you play hero. Either way, our new friend learns exactly what he needs to know about breaking disciplined weapons. Behind Joker, the augmented inmates spread out, Two-Face with both halves of his face now replaced by asymmetric cybernetics, Scarecrow's fear toxin delivery systems enhanced with mother box-derived technology, Poison Ivy merged with plant life that pulsed with bioorganic corruption. Darkseid had found the perfect testing ground. Gotham, where hope came to die, where the line between justice and vengeance blurred, where Batman's no-kill rule was tested nightly against enemies who deserved death but received mercy. And now Kratos stood in that shadow city, blades burning with the fury that had ended pantheons, facing enemies who were simultaneously monsters and victims, while Darkseid watched from beyond dimensions to see which way the God-Killer's control would break. Batman's voice cut through the tension, cold and absolutely certain. We take them alive. All of them. I don't care what tech they're packing. They're still human underneath. Still Gotham's broken, not apocalypse soldiers. They'll kill you while you're trying to save them, Kratos warned. They'll try, Batman acknowledged. That's Gotham. We save people anyway. Joker's laughter reached fever pitch. Oh, this is delicious. The detective's idealism versus the God-Killer's pragmatism. I can't wait to see who breaks first. Kratos felt the Spartan rage building, felt the blades of chaos hunger for blood that would end this threat permanently. Every instinct screamed to cut through the augmented inmates, eliminate the danger before it spread. But Superman's words echoed, free will is sacred, which means people have to be free to choose wrong and then choose better. And his own words to Atreus, teaching his son restraint. We master the darkness by acknowledging it, not by pretending we've evolved beyond it. Gotham's rain began to fall, cold, polluted, washing over the asylum's grounds like tears from a city that wept eternally for its own damnation. In that rain, Kratos made his choice. Non-lethal, he said to Batman, but if any of them get past me toward civilians, I won't ask permission first. Batman's mouth tightened into something that might have been approval. Fair enough. Oracle, alert Gordon. We need containment teams ready, and Kratos and I will handle the augmented inmates. Non-lethal takedowns only. You're insane, Oracle said over the comm. Both of you. We're in Gotham, Batman replied. Sanity is optional. Saving people isn't. The augmented inmates charge, and Kratos discovered what it meant to fight in a city where darkness bred monsters, but heroes fought anyway. The first wave hit like a tsunami of corrupted flesh and twisted technology. Two-Face led the charge, both sides of his body now asymmetric nightmares. One half burning with Omega energy implants, the other covered in circuitry that pulsed with stolen Motherbox technology. He flipped his coin mid-run, and whatever result he read in its surface made him target Kratos with both barrels of a weapon that shouldn't exist, a gun that fired condensed boom tube energy. Kratos rolled left as reality tore where he'd been standing, the shot opening a miniature portal that sucked nearby debris into dimensional nothing. The blades of chaos lashed out, not at Two-Face's body but at the weapon itself, chains wrapping around the barrel and yanking it from augmented hands. The gun clattered across rain-slicked concrete, and Kratos' boot crushed it before Two-Face could retrieve it. The coin says you die, Two-Face snarled, his corrupted half speaking in dual tones. Human voice overlaid with digital distortion. The coin lies, Kratos responded, and his blade pommel cracked against Two-Face's skull with precisely measured force. Enough to concuss, not enough to kill. The former district attorney crumpled. And Kratos felt no satisfaction in it, only grim acknowledgement that he'd succeeded in restraint when every instinct screamed for permanent solution. Batman moved through the augmented inmates like shadow given purpose, and Kratos found himself studying the detective's technique with grudging respect. No superhuman strength, no divine powers, just human skill refined to impossible precision. Explosive batarangs targeted cybernetic weak points, disrupting the apocalypse tech without damaging the hosts. Nerve strikes disabled without permanent harm. Every movement calculated to save enemies from themselves. It was madness. Beautiful, terrible madness. Scarecrow emerged from Arkham's interior, his fear toxin delivery system now enhanced with technology that made Kratos' divine senses recoil. And the toxin didn't just induce terror, it carried whispers of the anti-life equation. Mathematical proofs that fear was the only rational response to existence. I see you, ghost of Sparta, Scarecrow's voice hissed through his modified mask. I see the fear you hide beneath rage. Fear that you'll never escape what you are. Fear that your son will become you. Fear that redemption is simply delayed damnation. The toxins sprayed across the courtyard in a cloud that shimmered with impossible colors. Batman's rebreather deployed automatically, but Kratos had no such protection. The gas hit his lungs like ice water, and suddenly he wasn't in Gotham anymore. He stood in his home village, watching himself murder his wife and daughter. Ares laughing in the background, pulling his strings like a puppet master. But this time, and when the blood rage cleared and he saw what he'd done, Atreus stood beside the bodies, older, harder, eyes burning with the same divine fury that had defined Kratos' worst years. "You taught me well, father," Dream Atreus said, blades in hand dripping with innocent blood. "The cycle continues. Gods make weapons of their sons. Weapons kill everything they touch. This is our legacy." "No," Kratos gasped, falling to his knees in Gotham's rain. "You are better than me. I taught you restraint, taught you to be more than rage." "You taught me violence," Dream Atreus interrupted. "Everything else was just words trying to justify what you are. A killer, a destroyer, a weapon that pretends it chose peace." Kratos felt the Spartan rage building, felt the familiar escape of losing himself in fury rather than facing the fear Scarecrow's toxin weaponized. So easy to let the rage take him, to stop thinking and simply become the ghost again. Batman's hand gripped his shoulder, and a sharp sting in his neck cleared the toxin from his system. Antidote. The detective had dosed him before the fear could fully take hold, pulling him back from the edge. "Stay with me," Batman commanded. "The toxin targets your worst fears. Don't let it win." "My worst fear is myself," Kratos admitted through gritted teeth. "I know," Batman said simply. "Mine too. That's why we fight harder." Scarecrow was already moving, toxin sprayers targeting civilian evacuation routes. Batman threw himself into the path, cape spreading to absorb the chemical assault. Not rebreather filtering poison while his body took the hit meant for fleeing Arkham's staff. Kratos saw the detective's technique clearly now. He didn't just fight criminals. He fought to prove that hope could persist even in Gotham's darkness, that choosing to save enemies made you hero rather than fool. Insanity, but perhaps the kind Gotham needed. Poison ivy erupted from the asylum's greenhouse, and the plants that followed her were wrong. Beautiful and terrible, enhanced with bioorganic technology that made them pulse like living circuits. Vines that moved with artificial intelligence. Flowers that bloomed with spores designed to rewrite human neurochemistry. And at the center of it all, Ivy herself, more plant than human now, merged with technology that made her powers multiply exponentially. "You killed gods," Ivy said, her voice harmonizing with rustling leaves and digital whispers. "But did you ever stop to think what your wars did to the green? How much nature burned while Olympians played their power games?" Her vines lashed out, not trying to kill but to restrain, to pull Kratos into the biomass where her enhanced powers could rewrite his mind the way she'd been rewritten. Plants wrapped around his legs, his arms, began secreting compounds that would have turned normal humans into vegetables, literally and figuratively. Kratos burned them. The blades of chaos erupted with infernal fire that Hades himself had kindled, and the plants recoiled from heat that predated their existence. But he controlled the flames, kept them tight around his body rather than letting them spread. Burn what threatened him, preserve what didn't. Control, discipline, choice. One ivy screamed as her creations withered, not from sadism, but from genuine pain. She felt every plant's death as her own suffering. Kratos saw it, understood it, and immediately extinguished the flames. He couldn't fight her without causing agony to someone who was as much victim as villain. "Batman," he called out, "I can't fight her without—" "I know," the detective interrupted, already moving. A batarang with specialized payload struck Ivy's central mass, not explosive, but concentrated herbicide designed specifically for her augmented physiology. She collapsed as the chemical cocktail disrupted her connection to the enhanced plants, severing her consciousness from the biomass without permanent damage. "You have contingencies for everyone," Kratos observed. "Everyone," Batman confirmed, "including you." "Ah, never forget that." The Joker's laughter cut through the chaos like a serrated blade through flesh. The Clown Prince of Crime stood atop Arkham's front steps, his augmented eye pulsing with energy that made reality itself seem to flicker. Around him, the remaining augmented inmates formed a protective circle. Killers and psychopaths given power they couldn't understand, wielded by a madman who understood exactly what he was doing. This has been educational, Joker cackled, his voice carrying harmonic distortions that hurt even through the rain's damping effect. The God Killer can show restraint. The Bat continues his beautiful delusion that everyone can be saved. But let's raise the stakes, shall we? He pulled something from his garish purple coat, a device that looked like a mother box infected with a virus, pulsing with corrupted energy. Our apocalypse friend gave me a present, a little something to really test if you can maintain that lovely self-control when the cost gets personal. The device activated and reality tore. Not a boom tube, something worse. A rift that reached across dimensions, found connections, pulled on threads that shouldn't be vulnerable to technological manipulation. Through the tear came a voice Kratos hadn't heard in this universe. Young, uncertain, carrying power that hadn't fully matured, but burned with divine potential nonetheless. Father? Atreus stepped through the dimensional wound, his bow drawn, eyes wide with confusion that rapidly shifted to combat alertness. His son, here, in Gotham, pulled from the Norse realms by technology that shouldn't be able to reach across universal boundaries. Here Kratos felt ice replace his blood. How? Multiversal resonance, Batman said, his voice tight with anger directed at Joker. The fourth world tech can find dimensional echoes, pull people connected by strong emotional bonds. Joker weaponized your son against you. Joker's smile was a wound across reality itself. Now here's the test, God Killer. Your boy there, he's real, not illusion, not clone, but he's also the perfect hostage. Kill me and my augmented friends and this lovely little device loses its anchor. Your son gets shredded across dimensional boundaries, scattered atoms across infinite realities. Show restraint and try to save everyone, and Gotham burns while you play the hero. What's it gonna be? Atreus's bowstring creaked as he aimed at Joker, his divine heritage manifesting in the way his eyes began to glow. Father, I can stand down, Kratos commanded, his voice harder than he'd intended. Atreus was powerful, had trained well, but he was still young, still learning control, putting him in a Gotham situation where madness and innocence blurred. Listen to Daddy Boy, Joker laughed. Or don't. I love surprises. Will the son murder to protect the father? Will the father murder to protect the son? Will Batman's no-kill rule finally break when he has to choose between his principles and someone else's family? The drama, the tension, the... Batman moved with speed that even Kratos' divine senses barely tracked. Batarang in flight, striking the mother box device with precision that should have been impossible. The corrupted technology sparked, and for a moment the dimensional rift wavered. But Joker had planned for Batman's efficiency. The device had a failsafe, and its detonation would collapse the rift violently, potentially killing Atreus in the dimensional backlash. The Clown Prince's augmented eye pulsed with anticipation, waiting to see which way this would break. Kratos saw it all in fractional seconds, saw Batman calculating probabilities, saw Atreus readying an arrow that would kill Joker but doom himself, saw the augmented inmates preparing to attack while everyone was distracted. Saw the trap spring exactly as Darkseid had designed it. Impossible choice layered on impossible choice. Restraint weaponized into paralysis. And in that frozen moment, watching his son face death in a universe of darkness, because Kratos had dared to try redemption, the ghost of Sparta made his choice. Not rage, not surrender. Something else. Atreus, he said calmly, meeting his son's eyes across the chaos. Do you trust me? His son's response was immediate, no hesitation despite the impossibility surrounding them. Always, Father. Then shoot the device. Destroy it completely. Don't hold back. Batman's head snapped toward him. That will destabilize the dimensional rift. Your son will survive, Kratos interrupted, because I'm going into the rift with him. I've walked between realms before, survived dimensional barriers that killed gods. If the collapse happens, I'll shield him through it. You'll both die, Joker said, but his smile had faltered slightly. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Maybe, Kratos acknowledged, but you won't have the satisfaction of making me choose between restraint and my son's life. Atreus, now. His son's arrow flew true, divine energy crackling around the shaft. The arrow struck the corrupted mother box and detonated with force that would have vaporized a normal human. The device shattered, and the dimensional rift began collapsing with violent instability. Kratos was already moving, launching himself through the disintegrating portal, chains wrapping around Atreus, pulling him close as dimensional energies tore at flesh and bone and divine essence. He'd survived the Bifrost's fury when traveling between realms, had endured the space between dimensions when fleeing dying pantheons. His body remembered how to endure the impossible. But this was different. This was fourth world technology corrupted by Joker's madness, unstable in ways that made even Norse realm walking look gentle. Kratos felt his essence stretching, or felt the chains between dimensions trying to tear him and Atreus apart. And then Batman's hand grabbed his ankle. The detective had followed them into the rift, cape wrapped around all three of them, and in his other hand, he held something that pulsed with familiar energy. A real mother box, one of the new god's actual devices, its calm presence stabilizing the chaos around them. Never, Batman growled through gritted teeth as dimensional forces tried to shred him. Leave. He pulled them through collapsing reality. Gotham, cape spreading to shield them from the worst of it, without backup. They emerged on Arkham's grounds in a shower of dimensional sparks. Kratos and Atreus tumbled across rain-slick concrete, battered but alive. Batman landed in a crouch, his armor smoking from dimensional exposure. But the mother box in his hand continued its gentle pinging, Orion's voice crackling through its communication system. Detective, the device's collapse registered across dimensional barriers. Is the Spartan... We're alive, Batman confirmed. Barely, but Joker's leverage just evaporated. The Clown Prince stood on Arkham's steps, his augmented eye flickering as his trap collapsed around him. The remaining inmates were surrendering, their enhanced tech failing now that the corrupted mother box had been destroyed. Gordon's GCPD containment teams were rolling in, heavy weapons trained on the augmented criminals. And Joker was laughing, not from triumph, but from genuine appreciation. Magnificent, he howled into Gotham's rain. You actually did it. Chose both. Saved everyone and gave up nothing. That's not how these games work. Bats, you're supposed to lose something. That's the rule. Your rule, Batman said, walking toward him with deliberate purpose. Not mine. You wanted to test if the God Killer could maintain restraint under impossible pressure. He did. You wanted to prove my principles break when family's involved. They didn't. You failed, Joker. Failed! Failed! The Clown Prince's smile was manic ecstasy. I got exactly what I wanted. I proved that your restraint makes you better than him. That's the data our apocalypse friend needed. The God Killer maintains control when he has something to protect. But what happens when you take away what he's protecting? When you kill his son like his gods killed his family? Then the ghost returns and Darkseid gets his weapon. The words hung in Gotham's air like poison. And Kratos understood the full scope of the trap. Tonight wasn't about breaking him. It was about identifying the exact pressure point that would. Atreus. His son was the key Darkseid needed, the leverage that would transform restraint into rage. You told him, Kratos said quietly, rage building beneath iron control. You gave Darkseid the information he needed to destroy me. I gave him art, Joker corrected. Beautiful, terrible art. The ghost of Sparta, disciplined and controlled, protecting his son with newfound wisdom. But take the boy away, and the monster returns. That's poetry. That's perfection. That's... Kratos' blade was at Joker's throat before Batman could intervene. One motion, one strike. End the threat permanently. Protect Atreus from becoming Darkseid's leverage. Prove that some monsters deserve death. Father? Don't. Atreus' voice cut through the rage. This is what he wants. What they want. You taught me better than this. Kratos froze, blade pressed against flesh that would bleed so easily and so simply. Joker grinned up at him, not even trying to escape, simply waiting to see which way this would fall. And Batman stood to the side, hand on his belt, ready to activate the contingency if Kratos chose wrong. The ghost of Sparta had seconds to decide if redemption was real or simply delayed damnation. The blade trembled against Joker's throat, drawing a single bead of blood that mixed with rain and ran down the Clown Prince's neck like a crimson tear. Every instinct Kratos had honed through centuries of divine warfare screamed for completion. One stroke, end the threat. Protect his son from becoming leverage in a tyrant god's cosmic game. But Atreus's words echoed louder than instinct. This is what he wants. You taught me better than this. Slowly, with control that cost more than killing ever had, Kratos withdrew the blade. The chains of chaos retracted, and Joker remained alive, laughing, bleeding slightly, but breathing. Fascinating choice, Joker wheezed, his augmented eye pulsing with recorded data that was probably streaming directly to Apocalypse. The God Killer shows mercy to the one person in Gotham who absolutely, unquestionably deserves death. Darkseid's going to have such fun analyzing this paradox. Batman moved instantly, Batarang striking Joker's augmented implants with surgical precision. The Clown Prince convulsed as electrical current disrupted the stolen technology, and he crumpled unconscious before his laughter could twist into something darker. Gordon, Batman spoke into his comm. Joker is down. I need him in specialized containment, isolated from all technology, triple redundant systems, and medical evaluation for the augmentations. He's been exposed to fourth world tech we don't fully understand. Commissioner Gordon's weary voice crackled back. Copy that. Containment teams are securing the remaining inmates. Batman, what the hell happened here tonight? Gotham happened, the detective replied, like it always does. We'll debrief later. Kratos stood in the rain, blades slowly dissolving back into their dimensional storage, and felt Atreus approach cautiously. His son, pulled across universes, thrown into a nightmare city, forced to watch his father nearly break every principle he'd taught, looked older somehow. Less boy, more warrior. You held back, Atreus said quietly. Oh, even when he told you I was the target. Even when killing him would have been easier. You think I made the right choice? Kratos asked, genuinely uncertain. Atreus considered, then shook his head. I don't know. In our world, we've killed those who threatened us. Baldur, Modi, others. But this place, he gestured at Gotham's gothic darkness, it has different rules. Batman's rules. And I think maybe there's wisdom in trying to be better than what comes easily. Batman approached, Mother Box still pinging softly in his hand. His cowl was scorched from dimensional transit, his armor cracked in places where reality had tried to tear him apart. But his voice remained steady. Your son is perceptive. Gotham forces that choice constantly. Easier path versus right path. Most people break, because you didn't. Because Atreus was watching, Kratos admitted. If he hadn't been here, if I'd been alone. But you weren't alone, Batman interrupted. That's the point. Isolation is what creates monsters. Connection is what maintains humanity. Even for God killers. He held up the mother box. Orion wants to speak with you. Says it's urgent. The device's gentle pinging resolved into Orion's voice, tight with urgency that went beyond concern. Ghost of Sparta, the attack on you and your son was not simply information gathering. While you were engaged in Gotham, New Genesis detected unusual activity on Apocalypse. Massive energy signatures consistent with boom tube generation, but not for invasion, for retrieval. Kratos felt ice settle in his chest. Retrieval of what? We don't know, Orion admitted. But Father's spies report increased activity in Darkseid's science facilities. He's building something, and the data Joker transmitted is being fed directly into whatever project he's initiated. The Lord of Apocalypse moves pieces toward Endgame we cannot yet see. Wonder Woman's voice joined the communication. I'm in the watchtower with the rest of the League. Oracle forwarded us the battle data from Gotham. Kratos, the way Joker's device pulled your son across dimensions, that technology shouldn't exist. Mother boxes can create boom tubes between locations, but pulling someone from another universe entirely? Darkseid has been studying the multiverse, Batman said, his detective mind already assembling patterns. The dark multiverse breach, the crisis events, every reality incursion, he's been collecting data. If he's learned to weaponize dimensional resonance, to target people through emotional connections, he can pull anyone from anywhere, Superman finished, horror evident in the Kryptonian's voice. Family, loved ones, allies from across realities, all potential hostages or leverage. Atreus's hand went to his bow instinctively. So what do we do? Wait for him to come for me? For everyone Kratos cares about? No, a new voice interjected, deep and resonant with authority that made even Batman straighten slightly. High Father's presence manifested through the mother box, his image hovering in holographic form. We act first. The source has shown me fragments of Darkseid's design. He seeks to combine the god-killing essence you represent, Kratos, with the anti-life equation's mathematical proof of will's meaninglessness. Together, when they would create a weapon that could break even the strongest resistance, divine beings who have learned restraint would be more vulnerable than those who never question their nature. Which makes me the component he needs to complete his ultimate weapon, Kratos said flatly. Precisely, but there is a complication he did not anticipate. Highfather's holographic form shifted, showing images of Apocalypse's fire pits and science facilities. To integrate your essence into the anti-life equation, he needs more than observation. He needs you to choose to become the weapon. Needs the ghost of Sparta to willingly embrace what you've been fighting to transcend. Batman's cowl tilted. He's trying to corrupt Kratos' redemption arc. Force him to choose violence over restraint, prove that growth is impossible, and in that choice extract the psychological signature needed for the equation. Exactly, Highfather confirmed, which means Darkseid will escalate, will create scenarios where restraint equals death, not just for you, Kratos, but for those you've begun to protect. He will force you to choose between becoming the monster or watching your son, your new allies, entire worlds burn. Atreus's jaw tightened. Then we fight him, head on. No more games. Against Darkseid on Apocalypse? Orion's voice carried pained understanding. Boy, I have fought my father for millennia. He is entropy incarnate, tyranny given form. A direct assault would be suicide. But we can't just wait for him to complete whatever he's building, Wonder Woman argued. Where Diana Prince does not sit idle while tyrants prepare conquest. The debate continued. League members proposing and discarding strategies, Batman calculating probabilities, Orion sharing new Genesis intelligence. But Kratos found himself watching Gotham's rain fall across Arkham's grounds, washing blood and dimensional residue into sewers that had seen too much horror to ever truly cleanse. This city was symbol of everything wrong with heroic idealism. Criminals who escaped, monsters who reformed only to relapse, a detective who fought impossible odds with mortal flesh and refused to compromise principles even when pragmatism screamed for expedience. Madness. And yet, it endured. Gotham stood despite the darkness, because people like Batman chose to believe redemption was possible even when every shred of evidence suggested otherwise. Karana, there's another option, Kratos said, interrupting the strategic debate. One Darkseid won't expect because it requires trusting that redemption is real rather than elaborate self-deception. Batman's white lenses fixed on him. I'm listening. Darkseid wants to corrupt my choice to be better, wants to prove that growth is impossible, that weapons always revert to their nature, so we deny him that satisfaction. Kratos met the detective's gaze steadily. We go to Apocalypse, not for assault, not for sabotage, for diplomacy. The communication channel went silent. Even Joker, being loaded unconscious into a containment vehicle, would have laughed at the absurdity. You want to negotiate with Darkseid? Superman said slowly. The being who has tried to enslave Earth multiple times, who tortured Orion as a child, who seeks to eliminate free will from the universe. No, Kratos corrected. I want to offer him exactly what he thinks he wants. Me, willingly, on his terms. Let him run his tests, his scenarios, his attempts to break my restraint. And when they fail, when he sees that choosing to be better is genuine rather than performance, he loses the component he needs. That's insane, Batman said flatly. He'll kill you the moment he realizes you're not cooperating. Or worse, he'll keep your son hostage to force compliance. Which is why Atreus stays here, protected by the Justice League, by New Genesis, by every ally we can marshal. Kratos turned to his son, seeing protest already forming. I know you want to fight beside me, But this battle is one I must face alone. Not because you're not strong enough, but because your safety is the only thing that could make me break. Atreus's eyes blazed with the divine heritage he'd inherited. Father, I didn't come to this universe to hide while you face a tyrant god. No, Kratos agreed, gripping his son's shoulders. You came here because Joker pulled you across dimensions. But you'll stay here because I'm asking you to trust that I can face Darkseid's tests without becoming the monster again. Can you do that? The question hung between them. Father who'd murdered his family asking his son to believe he'd evolve beyond that nightmare. Son who'd seen his father's darkness, asking himself if trust was wisdom or naivety. I trust you, Atreus said finally. But I don't trust Darkseid not to cheat. Neither do I, Batman interjected. Which is why, if you're actually serious about this suicidal plan, you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. Wonder Diana's voice crackled with Amazonian steel. As am I. A warrior does not abandon an ally to face tyranny in isolation. And me, Orion added, if my father thinks he can break the God Killer, let him try while his son stands witness to his failure. Superman's objection came immediately. Bruce, Diana, Orion. This is exactly what Darkseid wants. He'll use you as leverage against Kratos, force impossible choices. Then he'll learn what we've already discovered, Batman said. Kratos fights better with allies than in isolation. Connection makes him stronger, not weaker. That's the flaw in Darkseid's entire analysis. He assumes emotional bonds or vulnerabilities to exploit. But for someone learning to be more than weapon, those bonds are what maintain humanity. Highfather's holographic form pulsed with source light. The detective sees truly. Darkseid's tyranny is rooted in isolation. Every being under his control is alone in their suffering, separated from community that might provide resistance. But you propose the opposite, a delegation that demonstrates connection as strength rather than weakness. It's still incredibly dangerous, Superman warned. Darkseid has home field advantage, superior numbers, and the Omega effect. If this goes wrong, it will go wrong, Kratos interrupted. Darkseid is too clever to accept surface diplomacy. He'll attack, test, try to break us. But if we can maintain discipline, if we can prove that restraint isn't weakness, but choice deliberately maintained, we deny him the psychological component he needs for the anti-life equation, Wonder Woman finished. We prove that beings who have learned to be better are stronger than those who never evolved. It's brilliant. Suicidal, but brilliant. Batman was already moving, pulling equipment from the Batmobile's armory. We'll need contingencies, full-spectrum countermeasures for Omega effect exposure, dimensional anchor in case he tries to scatter us across realities, and emergency extraction protocols synchronized with both New Genesis and the Watchtower. I can provide boom tube access, Orion said, and weapons designed specifically for apocalypse combat. May Father's fire pits won't burn through new god armor. I'll coordinate with the rest of the League, Superman said, resignation and respect warring in his voice. If Darkseid tries anything during your diplomatic visit, we'll be ready for immediate intervention. But Clark, Bruce, Diana, please be careful. We've lost too many people to that monster already. Kratos watched the heroes coordinate, watched Batman's contingency planning genius mesh with Wonder Woman's warrior pragmatism and Orion's intimate knowledge of apocalypse. This was what the Justice League represented. Individuals who could have been gods choosing instead to work as team, covering each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. So different from Olympus, where every god competed for dominance and saw allies as future threats. Maybe that's why this universe still had hope despite the darkness. Maybe that's why Superman's idealism hadn't yet curdled into Injustice Superman's tyranny. Because he wasn't alone, wasn't isolated, wasn't asked to bear the weight of godhood without support. Atreus moved to stand beside his father, and when he spoke, his voice carried understanding beyond his years. You're really going to walk into the fire pit voluntarily? Yes, Kratos confirmed. And you think you can face whatever he does without breaking? I have to believe that, Kratos said, because the alternative is accepting that I'll always be the ghost, that redemption is performance rather than genuine growth. And if I accept that, then what am I teaching you? That sons inevitably become their father's worst aspects? I won't give you that future. Atreus embraced him, warrior's grip, not child's need. And when they separated, there were tears mixing with rain, but also pride. Then go prove to a tyrant god that some weapons learn to put themselves away. Gordon's containment teams had finished securing Arkham, hauling augmented inmates into specialized vehicles, while GCPD officers tried to make sense of a night where boom tubes, dimensional rifts, and god killers had turned their city into cosmic battleground. Tomorrow Gotham would rebuild. It always did. The city's resilience was its own form of hope, battered but never broken, dark but never entirely without light. Batman stood beside the Batmobile, checking equipment with methodical precision. Wonder Woman tested her sword against a piece of apocalypse tech recovered from the inmates, gauging how her divine weapons would interact with fourth-world materials. And Orion's boom tube manifested, the portal's edges crackling with energy that promised passage to hell itself. Last chance to reconsider, Superman said, his voice carrying across the asylum grounds via comm system. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, Kratos replied. Darkseid won't stop testing until he gets the data he needs, or I prove his hypothesis wrong. Better to face the test on our terms than wait for him to create scenarios we can't control. Then go with my blessing, Highfather said, his holographic form already fading. The source whispers that this path leads to revelation, though whether that revelation serves light or darkness remains to be determined. Prove your growth genuine, Ghost of Sparta. You show the Lord of Apocalypse that even God-killers can evolve. The boom tube expanded, showing glimpses of Apocalypse hellscape, fire pits burning across a mechanized wasteland, parademons swarming like locusts, and in the distance, a fortress that dwarfed mountains. Darkseid's citadel, the heart of tyranny itself. Batman, Wonder Woman, Orion, and Kratos stood at the portal's threshold. Four warriors about to beard the devil in his own domain, armed only with weapons, wits, and the desperate hope that redemption was more than pretty lie. For Earth, Wonder Woman said. For New Genesis, Orion added. For Gotham, Batman contributed. Kratos looked back one last time at Atreus, his son, his anchor, his reason for choosing to be better than the ghost. Then he faced the portal and spoke his own oath. For the choice to be more than weapon. They stepped through the boom tube together, and Apocalypse swallowed them like the abyss swallowing light. Behind them in Gotham's reign, Atreus watched the portal close and made his own silent vow. If his father fell, if Darkseid broke what gods had failed to break, then the Lord of Apocalypse would learn that Kratos had taught his son well. And the Ghost of Sparta had not been the only god-killer in his family. Apocalypse breathed fire and suffering. The boom tube deposited them in a plaza that stretched for miles. Black stone carved with symbols that hurt to perceive. Architecture designed to crush hope through sheer oppressive geometry. And sky that burned with perpetual twilight of a world dying by degrees. Parademons circled overhead in formations that spoke of military precision. And in the distance, the fire pits roared with energies that consumed both matter and will. This was hell given industrial efficiency. This was tyranny perfected into landscape. Welcome, Desaad's voice oozed from speakers embedded in the stone itself, to Apocalypse. Darkseid has been expecting you. How delightful that you've saved him the trouble of collection. Batman's hand moved to his utility belt, but Kratos stopped him with a gesture. We came for diplomacy. Let's not start by confirming Darkseid's assumptions about violence being inevitable. Wise, Wonder Woman said, though her own hand rested on her sword's pommel, but prepared. These stones sing of torture and despair. Whatever diplomacy means here, it will be tested through suffering. Orion's astroforce flickered around his fists. Our barely contained rage making the new god's body practically vibrate. I was raised in these halls, trained in those fire pits. Every stone remembers my screams when Granny Goodness tried to break me into my father's weapon. Being here again is exactly what Darkseid wants, Batman interrupted. Emotional compromise before we even reach him. Control yourself, Orion. We need you tactical, not reactive. The new god's jaw clenched, but his astroforce dimmed slightly. Discipline over fury. Choice over nature. The same lesson Kratos taught Atreus. The same struggle every moment they stood in this place. A procession approached, female Furies in full formation, not the augmented versions Kratos had killed on New Genesis, but the originals. Lashina's replacement led them, her molecular blades humming with barely contained lethality. Patterned behind them, Kalibak towered like a monument to divine brutality, his earlier wounds healed and his smile promising violence. And at the center of the formation, carried on a floating platform that defied gravity through will alone, sat Granny Goodness herself. The architect of Apocalypse education system looked exactly like her title suggested. Grandmotherly face-hiding sadism refined over millennia. Sweet smile masking cruelty that made Olympus's worst tortures look amateurish. She had broken countless beings into Darkseid service, had trained the Furies, had tried to make Orion into a weapon and failed only because Highfather had traded his own son for the chance to save Darkseid's. Orion, dear, Granny crooned, how lovely to see you've come home. And you've brought such interesting friends. A god killer, an Amazon, and Gotham's detective. Darkseid will be so pleased with the variety. Where is he? Kratos demanded. We came to speak with your master, not his servants. Granny's smile widened, showing teeth filed to points. Impatient. I like that. Reminds me of Orion when he was young. All fury and no discipline. We tried so hard to cultivate that rage, turn it into something useful. Pity Highfather interfered before we could complete the process. Orion moved before anyone could stop him, Astro Force blazing, fist connecting with Granny's platform and sending it tumbling across the plaza. The old woman laughed even as she crashed, her augmented body taking impacts that would have killed normal humans. Still reactive, she cackled. Still letting rage override tactics. You've learned nothing, boy. Batman grabbed Orion's shoulder, pulling him back. She's baiting you. Every word is calculated to provoke exactly this response. Don't give her the satisfaction. She tortured me for years, Orion snarled. Made me fear my own rage because she used it against me. You ask me to show restraint in front of the one being who taught me that restraint was weakness? No, Kratos said, understanding the trap immediately. I ask you to show her that her teaching failed, that you learned restraint despite her efforts, not because of them. Prove that she wasted her time trying to break you. The words penetrated Orion's fury, and Kratos saw recognition dawn. Granny wanted him reactive, wanted to prove that his discipline was performance rather than genuine growth. Giving her that proof would serve Darkseid's larger purpose, demonstrating that beings who tried to evolve could be broken back to their base nature. You're right, Orion said, stepping back, Astro Force dimming to controlled burn rather than explosive release. I am better than what she tried to make me. Let her report that failure to my father. Granny rose, brushing dust from her grotesque dress. Her smile had shifted, still predatory, but now carrying respect that made Kratos' skin crawl. Perhaps you have learned something after all. Wonderful. Darkseid so enjoys revelations. Come, he awaits in the throne room. They walk through Apocalypse's nightmare architecture, escorted by Furies and Parademons who watch with mechanical precision. Kratos studied everything, the fire pit placement, the patrol patterns, when the way slaves moved through their duties with eyes that held no hope. This was what tyranny looked like when perfected. Not rebellion suppressed, but the will to rebel eliminated entirely. This is what the anti-life equation promises, Batman said quietly. Every being reduced to this. Perfect order through absolute despair. It's what my father seeks for the entire universe, Orion confirmed. He believes free will is a disease, that suffering comes from choice, and that by eliminating choice he creates paradise. He genuinely believes his tyranny is mercy. Wonder Woman's grip on her sword tightened. There is no mercy in this place, only suffering given industrial efficiency. How do you fight an enemy who believes his cruelty is kindness? By refusing to accept his premise, Kratos said. Us by maintaining that choice, even when it leads to suffering, is worth preserving. By proving that beings can choose to be better rather than being forced into compliance. They reached the throne room, and Kratos understood immediately why Darkseid had never felt threatened by rebellion. The chamber was impossibly vast, ceiling lost in distant smoke, walls carved with mathematical proofs that denied hope's validity, and floor made of some material that reflected torment like mirrors reflecting light. At the room's center, elevated on a dais that made supplicants crane their necks to even glimpse him, sat the Lord of Apocalypse himself, Darkseid. He was larger than Kratos had expected, not Zeus's theatrical grandeur, but mass that suggested inevitability. Stone-given flesh, entropy wearing armor, one eyes that glowed red with the Omega effect that could erase beings from existence with a glance. He didn't move as they approached, didn't acknowledge their presence beyond those burning eyes tracking their every step. This was a god who had no need to perform. His power was so absolute that even breathing in his presence felt like permission temporarily granted. Ghost of Sparta, Darkseid's voice resonated through dimensions, making the throne room's stones vibrate in sympathetic harmony. You have come to my domain voluntarily. How unexpected. How interesting. We came to negotiate, Batman said, his detective's mind already cataloging the throne room's layout, identifying potential escape routes and threats. You want Kratos as a component for the anti-life equation? Not we're here to discuss terms. Darkseid's laugh was tectonic plates grinding. Terms. The detective believes negotiation is possible with entropy. How delightfully naive. His gaze shifted to Wonder Woman. And the Amazon who has faced gods, but never one such as I. Tell me, Diana, does your Olympian heritage prepare you for what I represent? I have fought Ares, Wonder Woman replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. Faced my father Zeus when he became tyrannical. I know what corrupted gods look like. You are simply larger, not fundamentally different. Incorrect, Darkseid said. Your gods were powerful children playing at Dominion. I am Dominion itself. The anti-life equation is not conquest. It is inevitability given mathematical proof. And you, Ghost of Sparta, represent the final variable I require. He stood. Oh, and the simple act of rising made the throne room feel smaller. You have killed gods. Entire pantheons fell to your blades. But you did so through rage, through becoming the very monster you now claim to have transcended. I watched you in Gotham, watched you show restraint when killing would have been simpler, watched you choose mercy when pragmatism screamed for execution. Darkseid descended from his dais, each step perfectly measured. And I wondered, is this growth genuine, or is it simply rage temporarily suppressed? Is the Ghost of Sparta truly evolving? Or are you a weapon waiting for the proper trigger to revert to base programming? That's what you're going to test, Kratos said. It wasn't a question. Precisely. Darkseid stopped 10 feet away, close enough that Kratos could feel heat radiating from his stone flesh. I will create scenarios where restraint equals death, where mercy destroys what you've sworn to protect, where every choice to be better costs innocent lives. And when you finally break, when the ghost returns and you become the weapon again, I will extract that moment, crystallize the psychological signature of redemption failing. And with that data, the anti-life equation will be complete. And if I don't break, Kratos challenged. Darkseid's smile was terrible. Then you prove that evolution is genuine, that weapons can indeed choose to put themselves away, and I lose the component I need. But Ghost of Sparta, I have broken beings for millennia. I shattered Orion's resistance when he was a child, made him fear his own rage. I corrupted entire civilizations into accepting that free will was burden rather than gift. What makes you think your newfound restraint will survive what I have prepared? Batman stepped forward, positioning himself between Kratos and Darkseid. Because he's not alone. That's the flaw in your entire analysis. You assume isolation, that Kratos will face your tests without support, without allies reminding him why restraint matters. But we're here, and we won't let him break. The detective's loyalty is touching, Darkseid observed, but ultimately irrelevant. The tests I have prepared will separate you, will force individual choices where collective support becomes impossible, will make each of you choose between personal ethics and survival. And in those choices, I will learn what I need. He gestured, and the throne room's floor became transparent, showing views of Earth below, Metropolis, Gotham, Themyscira, New Genesis. A familiar locations, beloved places, potential targets. You came here for diplomacy, Darkseid continued. Very well, here are my terms. Submit to my testing. Face the scenarios I have prepared. If you maintain restraint, if you prove that growth is genuine rather than performance, I will abandon my pursuit of the anti-life equation's God-killing component. You will have demonstrated that the premise is flawed. And if we refuse, Wonder Woman demanded, then I target Earth directly. Not with invasion. I've learned that approach fails against the Justice League, but with precision strikes against everything you've sworn to protect. I will kill Kratos' son first. Then I will systematically eliminate every person the Ghost of Sparta has shown compassion toward. And when he finally breaks, when rage overrides restraint, I will collect what I need from the ruins of his redemption. The threat hung in the recycled air like a blade. Atreus, the Justice League, every civilian Kratos had saved in Metropolis and Gotham, all leverage, all potential triggers for the Ghost's return. So either we face your tests here, Batman said, or you force Kratos to break by destroying everything he's begun to care about. Precisely, Darkseid confirmed. I call it incentivized cooperation. You came seeking negotiation. These are my terms. Accept and face controlled scenarios where only your own choices determine outcome. Refuse, and I remove control entirely, forcing reactions rather than choices. Either path serves my purpose, but one is considerably more destructive to your universe. Kratos felt the trap's teeth close. One Darkseid had maneuvered them perfectly. Come to Apocalypse voluntarily, accept testing that would try to break him, all while his son and allies remained vulnerable on Earth. And if he refused, Atreus became the first casualty in a campaign designed specifically to shatter his restraint. There's no good choice here, Orion said, his voice tight with understanding. My father has engineered a scenario where every option serves his purpose. This is how he thinks, not in simple dominance, but in systems that remove agency while appearing to preserve it. Then we choose the option that maintains the most control, Wonder Woman said. We face his tests. We prove that restraint is genuine, and we trust that our collective discipline will outlast his scenarios. Batman's cowl turned toward Kratos. It's your call. He's targeting you specifically. Well, now the rest of us are here as support. But ultimately, this is about whether you can maintain growth under impossible pressure. Kratos looked at Darkseid, saw the certainty in those burning eyes, the absolute conviction that the Ghost would inevitably return, that redemption was simply delayed reversion. The Lord of Apocalypse had studied him, calculated his breaking point, and prepared tests designed to exploit every vulnerability. But Darkseid had made one crucial error in his analysis. He assumed Kratos fought for abstract principles, for redemption as concept, for growth as performance. The tyrant god didn't understand that Kratos' restraint wasn't philosophical, it was personal. He thought of Atreus learning to control his divine heritage, thought of teaching his son that rage was tool rather than master, that strength meant choosing mercy when killing was easier. Thought of the promise implicit in every lesson. I will be better than what the gods made me, so you can be better than what we both are. If he broke here, if he let Darkseid prove that evolution was impossible, then he taught his son that the cycle was inevitable, that fathers' sins always corrupted sons, that weapons could never truly put themselves away. I accept your term, Kratos said. Run your tests. Try to break me. And when you fail, when you see that some beings can choose to be more than their nature suggests, you will abandon this component of the anti-life equation. Darkseid's smile widened. Confidence. Admirable. Misplaced, but admirable. Very well, Ghost of Sparta. Let us begin. The throne room's floor split open, where revealing chambers below that pulsed with technologies and tortures beyond mortal comprehension. Kratos saw glimpses of impossible scenarios, Atreus tortured, Justice League members dying, worlds burning, all simulations designed to trigger the rage that had defined him for so long. Each of you will face personalized testing, Darkseid explained. Scenarios crafted to exploit your specific psychological vulnerabilities. The detective will face situations where his contingencies fail and innocents die. The Amazon will confront the limits of warrior honor when mercy becomes suicide. Orion will face his rage in environments designed to amplify rather than contain it, his gaze fixed on Kratos with terrible intensity. And you, Ghost of Sparta, will face the fundamental question, can you remain disciplined when the cost of restraint is watching everything you've begun to care about burn? Batman's hand found Kratos' shoulder. Solidarity, support, reminder that they face this together. Wonder Woman positioned herself on his other side, warrior's stance promising she would stand regardless of cost. And Orion stood before them all, between his father and his allies, embodying the same choice they all made, to be better than nature and nurture both suggested. Bring your tests, Kratos said. The ghost of Sparta died in Olympus's ashes. What remains is a father teaching his son that weapons can choose peace. That's a truth your anti-life equation will never understand. Darkseid laughed. Genuine, appreciative, terrible. We shall see, God-killer. Sorry, we shall see. The floor swallowed them, and Apocalypse's deepest hells opened to test if redemption was real or simply the most elaborate self-deception the multiverse had ever witnessed. The testing chambers were each unique nightmares tailored to their occupants. Kratos felt the separation immediately. Boom tube technology pulling them into individual scenarios, isolating them from the collective support that Batman had identified as their greatest strength. Darkseid understood tactics. He knew that together they could maintain discipline, remind each other why restraint mattered. Alone, they became vulnerable. Kratos materialized in a simulation so perfect, it took him seconds to recognize it wasn't real. His home in the Norse realms, the cabin he'd built with his own hands, where he'd taught Atreus to hunt and survive, and where he'd tried to leave the ghost of Sparta behind and become simply a father. Snow fell with the exact weight and texture of Midgard's winter. The smell of pine and wood smoke filled air that tasted of memories he'd thought safely buried in another universe. And sitting on the cabin's porch, bough in hand, was Atreus. "Father," his son said, standing with relief evident in every movement. "Thank the gods. I thought Darkseid had killed you. The Justice League said you were facing tests, but when the boom tube opened near me, I thought—" "This isn't real," Kratos interrupted, though saying the words cost more than he'd expected. The simulation was flawless. Every detail of Atreus's mannerisms, his voice, the way he held his bow, all perfectly replicated from Darkseid's observations. False Atreus's expression shifted to hurt confusion. "What? Father, I don't understand. It's me. I'm here. Darkseid must have pulled me from the watchtower using the same technology Joker had." "No!" Kratos forced steel into his voice, despite the part of him that desperately wanted to believe. "My son is protected by the Justice League, by Highfather's forces. You are simulation, Apocalypse technology reading my memories and creating what I most want to see." The false son's eyes widened with what looked like genuine fear. "Father, please. I know you've been tested before. I know gods have tried to trick you. But look at me. Really look. I'm real. I'm here. And there's something hunting us." From the tree line emerged creatures that made Kratos' blood freeze. Draugr, the walking dead from Norse mythology, but corrupted with apocalypse technology. Cybernetic implants crawled across rotting flesh. So omega red eyes glowed in skeletal sockets, and they moved with coordination that spoke of hive mind control, rather than mindless undeath. The simulation's false Atreus knocked an arrow with hands that trembled convincingly. "There are too many. We need to fight together like we always have, like you taught me." And here was the test's true nature. Fight alongside the simulation, accept it as real even knowing it was false, and prove that Kratos' perception could be compromised. That he would choose comforting lie over uncomfortable truth, or refuse to fight, maintain that it was simulation, and watch a perfect recreation of his son be torn apart by monsters while he stood by claiming it wasn't real. Either choice served Darkseid. Either choice demonstrated that the ghost could be manipulated through attachment rather than rage. "Oh, I know what you are," Kratos said to false Atreus, drawing the blades of chaos. "But I also know what you represent. You are my fear that I'll fail him again, that I'll choose wrong and lose another son to divine games." He turned toward the Draugr, blades burning with infernal fire. "So I choose to fight anyway. Not because I believe you're real, but because even false versions of my son deserve protection from monsters. Even simulations matter if I claim to have grown beyond seeing people as simply real or expendable. The Draugr charged and Kratos met them with Spartan precision. No rage, no fury, overwhelming tactics, just disciplined violence, each strike measured, each kill necessary but not savored. Fighting because protection mattered regardless of whether the protected was genuine. Behind him, False Atreus fired arrows that struck with his son's actual accuracy. The simulation fought beside him, and Kratos felt the terrible pull of wanting it to be real, wanting Darkseid's technology to have actually pulled his son here so they could face darkness together as they had in the Norse realms. But he maintained clarity, fought alongside the simulation while knowing it was false, protected what wasn't real because the act of protection mattered more than the reality of the protected. The Draugr fell, and false Atreus lowered his bow with expression of pride that cut deeper than any blade. You fought well, father, like you taught me. Controlled strength rather than mindless fury. I'm proud of you. Stop, Kratos said quietly. You're telling me what I want to hear. What Darkseid thinks will compromise my judgment. But my son would see through this test immediately. He knows I would never mistake simulation for reality, just as he knows I would protect the simulation anyway because that's what growth means. False Atreus's form flickered, Apocalypse technology struggling to maintain the illusion in the face of Kratos's absolute certainty. Then the simulation smiled. Not Atreus's smile, but something colder. Perceptive, Darkseid's voice spoke through false Atreus's mouth. You recognize simulation but fight to protect it anyway. Interesting. This suggests your attachment makes you simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable. You will fight for even false versions of what you care about, which means creating believable facsimiles becomes sufficient leverage. The cabin dissolved, replaced by Apocalypse's technological hellscape. Kratos stood in a chamber lined with screens showing his companion's own tests. Batman surrounded by dying Robins, each death a failure of his contingencies. Wonder Woman facing Amazons corrupted by anti-life, forced to kill her sisters or watch them destroy Themyscira. Orion drowning in Darkseid's rage, his discipline crumbling against psychic assault designed to amplify his worst nature. They struggle, Darkseid observed, his massive form manifesting in the chamber's center. The detective's paranoia proves insufficient. The Amazon's honor becomes suicide. My son's rage approaches critical threshold. But you, Ghost of Sparta, you recognize the test and choose to care anyway. That paradox is what I needed to observe. Then you learned nothing, Kratos said, blade still burning. I fought the simulation because protecting things matters regardless of their reality, because choosing to care is what separates weapons from people. You can't weaponize that. Can't I? Darkseid gestured, and new scenarios flooded the screens. Real ones. Not simulations, but actual surveillance of Earth. Metropolis under attack by parademons. Gotham burning as Apocalypse tech reactivated the asylum's augmented inmates. The Watchtower hull breached, Justice League members fighting desperately against overwhelming forces, and Atreus, his real son, fighting alongside Superman and Martian Manhunter as parademons swarmed the Watchtower's observation deck. This is happening now, Darkseid said. While you face simulations, I launch actual assault on everything you've begun to protect. The tests were never meant to break you directly. They were meant to occupy you while I removed what makes your restraint meaningful. Without your son to protect, without allies to fight beside, without innocence to save, what purpose does the ghost discipline serve? Kratos felt ice replace his blood. Real attack, real danger. Atreus fighting for his life, while Kratos stood in Apocalypse's testing chamber, proving philosophical points about growth and redemption. You see the choice now, Darkseid continued. Maintain your restraint, refuse to become the weapon, and watch your son die while you prove your growth is genuine. Or embrace the ghost again, tear through my forces with the fury that ended Olympus, save what matters to you, and prove that redemption was performance. Either way, I learn what I need. The blades of chaos burned hotter, responding to rage building in Kratos' chest. The familiar fury, the weapon's call, how easy it would be to let the ghost return, to stop thinking, and simply become pure destruction aimed at protecting Atreus. How satisfying to prove Darkseid right if it meant his son lived. But then he heard his own words to Atreus, teaching restraint. We master the darkness by acknowledging it, not by pretending we've evolved beyond it. And Batman's observation in Gotham, isolation is what creates monsters. Connection is what maintains humanity. And Superman's idealism that shouldn't survive in universe this dark, but somehow did. Free will is sacred, which means people have to be free to choose wrong and then choose better. Kratos looked at Darkseid and made his choice. You're right, he said, and watched surprise flicker across the tyrant god's stone features. This is the test, the real one. Not simulations or scenarios, but watching my son fight while I'm trapped here, knowing that letting the ghost return would give me the power to save him immediately. He lowered the blades of chaos, letting them dissolve back into their dimensional storage. But I also know something you don't. Something your isolation prevents you from understanding. And what is that? Darkseid demanded. That I'm not alone, Kratos said. My son fights beside the Justice League. Superman, who is stronger than I am. Martian Manhunter, who has powers I've never faced. And Batman planned for this. He always plans for this. You think removing me from Earth leaves it defenseless? But you're wrong. They're heroes. They save people. That's what they do. He met Darkseid's burning gaze without flinching. So I choose to trust them. Choose to believe my son will survive, not because I break discipline and become the weapon again, but because he's surrounded by allies who are better than I ever was. And that choice, trusting others, accepting that I don't have to carry every burden alone, that's more growth than all your tests combined. The chamber went silent. On the screens, the battles continued. Atreus fought with skill Kratos had taught him. Superman's heat vision carved through parademon formations. Batman's strategies turned chaos into controlled retreat. They were struggling, but they were holding. And Kratos stood in Apocalypse's heart, weaponless, trusting that his newfound family would survive without him becoming the monster again. Darkseid studied him for a long moment. Then impossibly, the Lord of Apocalypse smiled, not with cruelty, but with something like respect. Interesting, he said. You pass a test I didn't intend to create. I sought to prove that attachment was vulnerability. Instead, you've demonstrated that trust is strength. He gestured, and boom tubes opened. One showing Kratos' companions being released from their own testing chambers, another displaying the assault on Earth already withdrawing. The attacks were real but limited, sufficient to test your response but not to cause irreparable harm. I wanted to see if the God Killer would choose immediate action over disciplined restraint. You chose restraint. Batman emerged from his boom tube, costume torn and expression grim but alive. Wonder Woman followed, sword bloody but stance victorious. Weorian came last, Astro Force dim but controlled, rage acknowledged but not surrendered to. We all passed, Batman said, reading the situation immediately. Different tests, same fundamental question. Would we revert to base nature under sufficient pressure? We didn't. Correct, Darkseid acknowledged, which means my hypothesis was flawed. The God-killing essence I sought to integrate into the anti-life equation assumed that beings who learned restraint were weaker than those who never questioned their nature. You have proven otherwise. Growth is genuine. Evolution is possible, and therefore this particular component cannot serve my purpose. He turned to Kratos directly. I concede, Ghost of Sparta. You have demonstrated that weapons can indeed choose to put themselves away. When that redemption is not performance but genuine transformation, the anti-life equation's God-killing component requires beings who revert under pressure. You have proven yourself poor material. So you'll let us leave? Wonder Woman asked, suspicion evident. Just like that? Just like that, Darkseid confirmed. I am many things, but I honor my terms. You faced my tests. You maintained discipline. You proved your premise. Our negotiation is concluded. He paused, those burning eyes fixing on Kratos one final time. But know this, God Killer. While you are unsuitable for my current purpose, you remain interesting. You have shown me that even in a universe of entropy, growth persists. That evolution continues despite all evidence suggesting it should fail. This intrigues me. I don't care about your intrigue, Kratos said flatly. When I care that you'll leave my son, my allies, and Earth alone. For now, Darkseid agreed, this component of the anti-life equation is abandoned, but the equation itself remains my goal, and there are other paths to completion. When I find them, we may meet again. Until then, he gestured and boom tubes opened for each of them. Go. Return to your universe of hope and shadows. Prove that your growth persists beyond my observation. That would be educational. The boom tubes waited, promising escape from apocalypse hell, but Kratos hesitated, needing to know one more thing. The attacks on Earth, my son, was he ever in real danger? Darkseid's smile was terrible and honest. Yes, I don't test with simulations when reality serves better. Your son fought actual parademons, faced genuine threat. He survived through his own skill and the Justice League's protection. You chose to trust rather than save him personally, and that trust was validated. Hold on to that lesson, Ghost of Sparta. It may serve you when darkness comes again. Kratos nodded once, then stepped through the boom tube. Batman, Wonder Woman, and Orion followed, and Apocalypse released them back to the universe of hope they'd left behind. On his throne, surrounded by the machinery of tyranny, Darkseid contemplated what he'd learned. The God-Killer had been unsuitable for his immediate purpose, yes, but the data gathered revealed something perhaps more valuable. Proof that beings could evolve beyond their nature through connection rather than isolation. And if connection made evolution possible, then severing connection would make devolution inevitable. And a new component for the anti-life equation began forming in Darkseid's vast intelligence. Not God-killing essence, but isolation-inducing mathematics. If he could prove that severing bonds destroyed growth, forced regression to base nature, then even evolved beings would become vulnerable. The Ghost of Sparta had taught him much. In time, those lessons would serve the anti-life equation's completion. But that was for later. For now, Darkseid allowed himself rare satisfaction. He had tested the limits of redemption and found them more substantial than anticipated. The universe remained interesting after all. The boom tube deposited them in the Watchtower's main hall, where the Justice League waited with weapons ready and concern etched across every face. Superman moved first. Heat vision already fading from his eyes as he confirmed they were truly themselves, and not Apocalypse duplicates. Martian Manhunter's telepathic scan washed over them, gentle but thorough, ensuring no mental corruption had taken root during their time in Darkseid's domain. And Atreus stood among them, bow still in hand, divine energy crackling around him from recent combat. When he saw Kratos emerge, relief and anger warred across his young features. "You left me behind," Atreus said, and the accusation carried weight beyond words. "Told me to trust, to wait here while you faced Darkseid. Do you have any idea how hard it was to stand by while parademons attacked, knowing you were in that hell-facing test designed to break you?" Kratos crossed to his son. He'd gripped his shoulders with hands that had wielded blades against gods but now simply held family. "I know, and I'm sorry, but you survived. Fought well from what Darkseid showed me. Proved that my lessons took root. You didn't let rage override tactics even when facing overwhelming numbers." "Superman helped," Atreus admitted, some of the anger fading, "and Martian Manhunter, and Oracle's tactical coordination. But Father, I was terrified. Not of the parademons, but that Darkseid would break you. That you'd come back as the ghost again, and I'd lose the father I've been learning to know." "He tried," Kratos said simply. "Showed me simulations of you. Attacked Earth while I was trapped in testing chambers. Created scenarios where restraint meant watching everything burn. But I chose to trust, or chose to believe you'd survive without me becoming the weapon again. And you did." Batman approached, cowl retracted to reveal Bruce Wayne's calculating expression. Darkseid honored his terms. That's unexpected. He usually finds loopholes, technicalities that justify breaking agreements. But he let us walk away. "Because we proved his hypothesis wrong," Wonder Woman said, cleaning her sword with methodical precision. "He sought to demonstrate that evolved beings were weaker than those who never questioned their nature. We showed him otherwise. In his twisted logic, that's victory for us. which means he admits defeat on this particular front. Orion's astroforce still flickered around his fists, rage not quite contained despite passing Darkseid's tests. Don't mistake retreat for surrender. My father abandons one path to the anti-life equation only when he's found another. He learned something from testing us, something he'll use differently. The question is what, Batman said, already pulling up holographic displays analyzing their time on Apocalypse. Oracle compile all data from the Watchtower's external sensors during the Parademon assault. Cross-reference attack patterns with known Apocalypse tactics. Darkseid doesn't waste resources on random testing. Every action serves multiple purposes. Oracle's voice came through the comm system, sharp with the exhaustion of coordinating Earth's defense while the Trinity was off-world. Already running analysis, initial results show the assault was precisely calibrated. Enough force to seem genuine, not enough to cause catastrophic casualties. Like he was measuring response times, seeing how quickly the League mobilizes, how effectively we coordinate without Batman's direct leadership. He was gathering tactical intelligence, Superman realized, his expression darkening. The whole operation, pulling us to Apocalypse, testing our restraint, attacking Earth, it was reconnaissance disguised as negotiation. Not just reconnaissance, Martian Manhunter added, his telepathic senses picking up patterns the others missed. I detected unusual psychic frequencies during the assault. Darkseid was measuring emotional bonds, the strength of connections between League members, between Kratos and his son, between all of us. He was mapping our network. Kratos felt ice settle in his chest. He's going to target the connections themselves, not our powers, not our restraint, the bonds that make restraint possible. If isolation creates monsters, then a tyrant seeking to create controlled weapons would target whatever prevents isolation. Batman's eyes narrowed behind his cowl. That's his new component. Not God-killing essence from beings who learned restraint, but isolation-inducing mathematics. Prove that severing bonds destroys growth, forces regression to base nature, and even evolved beings become vulnerable to the anti-life equation. The implication hung in the Watchtower's recycled air like a blade. Darkseid had let them win this battle because losing taught him exactly what he needed to win the larger war. The ghost of Sparta's redemption, maintained through connection with Atreus and newfound allies, had revealed the precise vulnerability the Lord of Apocalypse could exploit. So what do we do? Atreus demanded. Wait for him to target our bonds? Watch him try to isolate everyone until we become weapons again? No, Wonder Woman said firmly. We do what warriors have always done when facing superior strategic position. We strengthen our defenses while seeking his weakness. Darkseid revealed something too in these tests. He's obsessed with the anti-life equation, to the point of abandoning viable paths when they don't fit his perfect vision. That obsession is vulnerability. Superman nodded, hope kindling, despite the strategic disadvantage. He could have killed us on Apocalypse, could have captured Kratos and extracted what he needed through force. But he didn't, because that wouldn't prove his premise. He needs willing corruption, chosen devolution, mathematical proof that his way is inevitable. His need for validation is his weakness. And we exploit that by refusing to give him the data he seeks, Batman concluded. We maintain our bonds, strengthen them, prove that connection persists despite his attempts to sever it. Make isolation-inducing mathematics impossible by demonstrating that some links can't be broken. Kratos looked at his son, saw determination replacing fear, saw the divine heritage and mortal wisdom, combining into something neither Greek nor Norse gods had achieved, genuine growth through choice rather than cosmic mandate. Then he looked at the Justice League, this family of gods and mortals who fought to protect rather than dominate, who showed mercy when vengeance would be easier. I came to this universe by accident, Kratos said, torn from my world by dimensional breach, one thrown into conflicts between new gods and heroes. But standing here now, having faced Darkseid's tests and survived with discipline intact, I think maybe the accident was purpose I didn't recognize. He met Batman's eyes. You told me in Gotham that trust is earned over time, that you'd prepared contingencies in case I broke. Do you still have that explosive ready? Batman's expression remained unreadable. Yes. Good, Kratos said. Keep it. Update it as you learn more about my capabilities. Because the moment I become the weapon again, the moment the ghost overrides the father, I want you to use it. That's not threat or challenge, it's trust. I'm trusting you to stop me if I can't stop myself. Something shifted in Batman's expression. Not quite a smile, but acknowledgement that Kratos understood what the Dark Knight represented. To not paranoia, but preparation. Not distrust, but recognition that even heroes needed safeguards against their own potential tyranny. I'll keep it active, Batman confirmed, and I'll hope I never need to use it. Superman's hand found Kratos' shoulder, the Kryptonian's strength evident in the gentle grip. You've earned your place here. Prove that redemption is genuine, that weapons can choose peace. The League would be honored if you'd consider staying on Earth. Not as prisoner or probationary member, but as ally, as friend. I have a son to raise, Kratos said, looking at Atreus, a boy learning to balance divine heritage with mortal wisdom. But yes, we'll stay. Help protect this universe while he grows. Face whatever comes when Darkseid tries his new approach. And maybe, if we're fortunate, he proved that some bonds are strong enough to survive entropy itself. Atreus smiled, genuine joy breaking through Warrior's discipline. Does this mean I get to train with the Justice League? Because I have questions about Superman's flight technique and Wonder Woman's combat forms and— One step at a time, Kratos interrupted, but there was warmth in his voice. First we find quarters, then we coordinate with Highfather about New Genesis's defenses. Then, maybe Superman can show you how Kryptonians fly. The Kryptonian laughed, the sound carrying hope that Olympus had never known. I'd be happy to, though fair warning, your son's already pretty impressive with that bow. I saw him take down 3 Parademons with one shot during the assault. He learned from the best, Kratos said, a pride evident despite his attempt to maintain Spartan stoicism. Oracle's voice interrupted the moment. Hate to break up the bonding session, but we've got incoming transmission. It's— Hi, Father. He says it's urgent. The holographic display manifested, showing the Lord of New Genesis with expression grave. Justice League, Ghost of Sparta. I have consulted the source regarding Darkseid's new direction. The visions are troubling. He will not immediately pursue isolation-inducing components for the anti-life equation. Instead, he focuses on something else, something the source cannot clearly show, but which carries implications of multiversal significance. What does that mean? Batman demanded. It means Darkseid is looking beyond our universe, Highfather said. The data he gathered from Kratos' arrival, the dimensional breach that brought him here, the multiversal resonance Joker's device exploited, has given him new avenue to explore. He seeks not just to perfect the anti-life equation for this reality, but to test its components across the entire multiverse. Wonder Woman's grip tightened on her sword. He's going to target other universes, other versions of Earth where bonds are weaker, where heroes haven't learned the lessons we have. Precisely, Highfather confirmed. And if he succeeds in breaking other realities' resistance, he'll learn how to break ours. The Ghost of Sparta's redemption saved this universe, but it may have endangered countless others. Kratos felt the weight settle on his shoulders, familiar burden of unintended consequences, actions meant to protect causing wider harm. And he'd faced this before when ending Olympus triggered catastrophes across the Greek world. History repeating, but with multiversal scope. Then we warn them, he said. Whatever universe's Darkseid targets, we find a way to reach them first. Share what we learned. Help them strengthen their own bonds before he can exploit them. Boom tube technology can't reach other universes, Orion said. That requires different mechanics, different energies. The Speed Force could potentially breach dimensional barriers, but even Flash's abilities are limited to specific vibrational frequencies. Batman's mind was already working the problem, connections forming faster than the others could articulate. But we have someone who was pulled across universes. Kratos arrived here through dimensional breach, which means there's a trail, a resonance signature, in a pathway that could theoretically be retraced or redirected to other realities. You want to use me as a multiversal beacon, Kratos understood immediately. Find other universes using the same signature that brought me here. Warn them about Darkseid's new approach. It's theoretical, Batman admitted, and dangerous. Multiversal travel without proper containment could scatter your atoms across infinite realities or strand you in dark multiverse hells that make apocalypse look pleasant. But if there's even a chance to prevent Darkseid from perfecting his equation through multiversal testing, we have to try, Superman finished, because that's what heroes do. We protect people, even people in universes we've never seen, from threats they don't yet understand. Kratos looked at Atreus and saw his son's expression shift from concern to determination. The boy had grown so much since their journey began in the Norse realms, had learned that being hero meant accepting burdens you didn't ask for because they needed carrying. If we do this, Kratos said, if we try to warn other universes, Atreus comes with me. No more separation. No more watching from safety while I face cosmic threats. We're family. We fight together or not at all. Atreus's smile was fierce and proud. Together! The way you taught me. The way we survived everything our world threw at us. Batman nodded once. Then we start researching. The breach that brought Kratos here left traces, dimensional signatures, reality echoes. If we can amplify and redirect them, we might be able to establish limited communication with adjacent universes. Warn them. We share our experience. Build a multiversal network of bonds that even Darkseid's mathematics can't sever. It's ambitious, Wonder Woman said. Possibly impossible. But then again, we just walked into Apocalypse, faced Darkseid's tests, and walked out with our principles intact. Impossible seems negotiable. Highfather's hologram pulsed with source light. The path ahead is unclear. The source shows me fragments, possibilities rather than certainties. But one thing is evident. The ghost of Sparta's arrival in this universe was the beginning of something larger than any of us anticipated. Whether that something serves light or darkness remains to be determined by the choices you make. The transmission ended, leaving the Justice League standing in the watchtower with new purpose crystallizing. Darkseid had abandoned one approach to the anti-life equation, but found another. The war wasn't over. It was expanding, threatening not just Earth, but the entire multiverse. But Kratos had learned something crucial in his journey, from weapon to father, from ghost to man, choosing daily to be better than his nature suggested. Evil persisted not because good was weak, but because isolation made strength impossible to maintain. Connection, family, allies, bonds deliberately chosen and actively maintained, was what let finite beings stand against infinite entropy. Darkseid would learn that lesson eventually. And when he did, when the Lord of Apocalypse discovered that some bonds transcended mathematics and could survive even the anti-life equation's proof of meaninglessness, he would face not just the ghost of Sparta, but an entire multiverse of beings who had chosen connection over isolation. But that confrontation lay in the future. For now, standing in the watchtower with his son beside him and allies surrounding him, Kratos allowed himself something he hadn't felt since before the Greek gods broke him. Hope. Not naive optimism, not Superman's idealistic belief that everything would work out, but genuine, hard-won hope born from surviving tests designed to break him and emerging with discipline intact. Hope that redemption was real, that weapons could choose peace, that fathers could teach sons to be better than the darkness that birthed them. Outside the watchtower's windows, Earth turned beneath them, blue and green and beautiful, despite all the violence and suffering that scarred its surface. A world worth protecting, a universe worth defending, a multiverse worth warning. And somewhere in the Norse realms, in the cabin Kratos had built before Dimensional Breach tore him away, snow continued to fall on empty rooms that waited for their family's return. Not immediately, not until Darkseid's threat was understood and countered, but eventually, because the ghost of Sparta had learned to put away his blades, and the father who remained intended to teach his son that even in universes of gods and tyrants, hope persisted. That lesson was worth any test, worth any sacrifice, worth standing against entropy itself. Darkseid would come again. The anti-life equation would threaten reality in new forms. Darkness would test every bond, every connection, every choice to be better than nature suggested. But Kratos had faced the Lord of Apocalypse and proven that evolution was genuine, had chosen trust over isolation, had maintained restraint when rage would have been easier, And if one god killer could grow beyond his weapons, then perhaps, just perhaps, the entire multiverse could learn that same lesson. That hope would have to be enough. The ghost of Sparta's legend had been written in blood across Olympus's ruins, a tale of vengeance and divine murder that ended pantheons and drowned the Greek world in chaos. But in the DC universe, where gods walked among mortals and hope fought eternally against tyranny's shadow, Kratos discovered that legends could be rewritten. He had arrived through dimensional accident, armed with blades forged in family tragedy and tempered in divine blood. The Justice League had every reason to fear him, ere to see only the weapon rather than the man struggling to emerge from beneath centuries of rage. Yet they offered what Olympus never had, the chance to prove that growth was genuine, that choice mattered more than nature, that weapons could learn to put themselves away. Darkseid's tests had pushed him to every limit, showed him simulations of his son dying, forced him to watch Earth burn while trapped in apocalypse hell, created scenarios where restraint meant death and mercy equaled devastation. The Lord of Tyranny had studied the God-Killer's redemption and sought to prove it performance rather than transformation. But Kratos had learned something in his journey from the Norse realms to this universe of darkness and light. Isolation made monsters, but connection maintained humanity. With Atreus depending on his example, with Batman's contingencies reminding him of accountability, with Superman's hope and Wonder Woman's honor, and Orion's parallel struggle all surrounding him, he had found strength to choose discipline over destruction. The ghost remained. The blade still burned with infernal fire. The capacity for divine slaughter lived in every muscle and scar. But now those things were tools he wielded rather than masters he served. The difference was choice. The difference was everything. Darkseid would return with new approaches, new components for the anti-life equation, new tests designed to break bonds and force devolution. The war against entropy was eternal, just as Gotham's darkness was eternal, just as the struggle between hope and despair would continue until the universe's final breath. But standing in the watchtower with his son beside him and allies surrounding him, Kratos understood what Batman had learned long ago in Gotham's shadows. You fought anyway. You maintained discipline despite impossible odds. You chose to protect even when pragmatism screamed for surrender. Not because victory was guaranteed, but because the choice to fight was what separated heroes from weapons. The Fourth World's eternal war had gained a new warrior. Earth had gained a defender who knew tyranny's face intimately and would oppose it with every lesson learned from murdering gods who deserved their fate. And Atreus had gained confirmation that his father's teachings were genuine, that even the ghost of Sparta could evolve beyond what vengeance had made him. In time, other universes would face their own dark sides, with their own tests of whether redemption could survive cosmic tyranny. When that happened, Kratos intended to be there, not as the weapon he'd been, but as the example of what choosing to be better could achieve. Until then, he would train with the Justice League, teach Atreus in a universe of gods who hadn't yet learned to fear the God-Killer, and prove daily that growth was genuine rather than performance. The blades would return to their sheaths more often than they emerged. The rage would be acknowledged but not surrendered to. And the ghost of Sparta would become legend, not for the gods he'd killed, but for the weapon he'd chosen not to be. In the DC universe, where hope shone brightest in the darkest night, even God-killers could find redemption. That was a truth worth any trial, worth any sacrifice. Worth standing against apocalypse itself. The war continued. But this time, the ghost of Sparta fought not for vengeance, but for something infinitely more powerful. The belief that beings could choose to be better than what fate and fathers both decreed. And that choice, maintained across infinite tests and eternal struggles, was the one weapon even Darkseid's mathematics could never break.